KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan Tenzin Moriarty. Dagan, thank you for joining me today. How are you today, my friend?
I am your Sherpa.
Yes, you are. What a great character. Yeah. How are you today? Yes.
I'm good, dude.
Yeah.
Everything's good. Yeah. I was just I'm just gonna go right into it. I was really excited. This is a one-off for us. Maybe the first time. I have a culinary tip for you, Kyle.
Oh.
And not typical of our opening conversations, but I have a little cooking tip that I've been very proud of. And a little earlier while I was working the day job, I'm like, what am I going to talk about on the show tonight with Kyle? And then I went down for lunch and I said, you know what? I got to talk about this thing that I discovered, a kitchen discovery. I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's Martha Stewart worthy, this kitchen tip. But I think a lot of people could probably use this because it's not advanced at all. So here's the thing. Now, Kyle, I'm not even sure about your egg eating habits. Are you a hard-boiled egg guy at all?
I like them. I rarely make them, but I like eggs in all forms. So,
me too. I feel the same way. Yeah. Right. It's a little scrambled, sunny side up, over medium. I'll go with the poached.
Oh, yeah. Whatever. Poached egg is great. Yeah. And I would say a fried egg has a place as well.
Fried egg, delicious.
Sure.
Now, hard-boiled egg, I could speak to what you're saying, though. Hard-boiled egg is almost, people don't think of it. It's kind of unrecognized. You don't really ever order them in restaurants, for instance, right? You go out for a diner for breakfast. You're never thinking hard-boiled egg.
It's in that one salad. What's that? Cobb
salad.
The
Cobb salad.
Right. That's the only thing I think about when in the restaurant. That would be the only reason I would see that.
And who do you think of when you think of Cobb salad, by the way? One person comes to
really,
mind.
I'm not going to say the same person because I think of Seinfeld when I think of Cobb salad.
Oh, you think? Oh, that's actually a good one. Yeah. That's actually a good take. I always think of Dad because that's what he always gets.
Sure.
Right. The Cobb salad and coffee combination. Disgusting.
It's ridiculous. And then
Absolutely
he'll if we're at the diner, he'll also, if I'm just done with my cheeseburger, he'll just take that too.
Listen, I didn't even have Dad in the crosshairs. I don't even know where he came from, but that is typical of KnockBack.
By the way, just a sidebar. Allie messaged us because she was listening to the last episode we did or a few episodes ago, we were talking about how during our childhood bedrooms one, when she had said we were making fun of her because when Dad built an entirely new house, he still didn't give her own bedroom. And she said that she had never thought about it. I mean, that's some programming, dude. That's some programming nurture shit that like mom and dad just never made it an option.
Something is going on.
Never thought about it. I can't. That's fucking crazy.
She was the victim of that situation. Her and Dana were the victim of that. They're the one who had to share a bedroom. They came from sharing a bedroom, went to the new house, shared a bedroom. Allie never asked. Never dawned on her.
Maybe a little bit of a ditzy thing.
Like, I don't know.
When
we finally get the girls, Allie and Dana, in this case, Allie on the show.
Dana's the holdout. I mean, Allie's ready to go. I just want to make sure we do them together. We could do an episode with Allie one and Dana the other, or we can. But I feel like it would be better if we did them all.
Oh, I'd love to for all four of us.
Right.
That
dynamic. And I said I want to do something about the 70s. I want to do something about the 80s, and I want to do something about the 90s. And
I love that.
That's my vision for it.
I love breaking it down by decade like that. It's the perfect model for us. And Dana is. I often think Dana is the funniest of the four of us. So just having her on the show and the dynamic between the four of us, I think would be very special. Look forward to that.
I think, I will make it happen. My vision is for us to do it, like just go to a recording studio in Richmond, just rent a place, right? That's what I'll do. I mean, it's just the easiest way to do it. It'll be like $1,000 or whatever.
Great idea. Right.
And you just have people like work the boards and record it, and we'll just do it that way. And that way we're positive that it's, like the tragic lost dad episode, which was the only episode of KnockBack we've lost, which was my fault. I can't believe it. We actually technically have it, but it's all being picked up off of the wrong microphone. So it's like, you're like eavesdropping on the conversation, as it were.
That was a shame. But this one would be even better and worth its weight in gold. And then who knows? We could even have a whole thing. We could have the whole family, all six of us in the room.
Sure. That will just turn into the therapy session we all have needed for the last.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine.
Who doesn't want to have the glass to the wall for that?
I know the six of us all with microphones would not. I don't know where that would go. That would be interesting, but nonetheless, Yeah, that was I thought that was funny with Allie, that
That's
situation
such
after
a
that.
funny. That's a fun. Listen,
But
let me
anyway,
get
we
back to my
interrupted.
cooking thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I totally interrupted you. So
No, that's okay. That's
let's
okay.
get back to the
That was a
cooking thing. Yeah,
fun. That was a fun sidetrack.
yeah. Sorry.
But yeah, to keep it relatively concise. So I have this. I'm eating more hard boiled eggs. Trying to eat more lunch. Like trying to have 3 square meals instead of just like doing what you do, waiting till later on, and trying to have a little bit more habit forming things going on with meals in the day. Also, just to take a break from the computer. That's, hence the walks that I've been talking about.
Yeah,
Also, with
good.
the eating.
Good.
So with lunch, I feel like I'm trying to figure it out. Like, oh, maybe tuna fish. That's kind of a blast from the past, or hard boiled eggs, right? That's where hard boiled eggs comes in. So, but I feel like with hard boiled eggs, I enjoy them. It's nice for that to be back on the docket. But the thing with hard boiled eggs is they're a pain in the ass to peel. And I never quite figured this out, Kyle. Now, it always this is a weird parallel, but follow me. I always think of it almost like bowling, for me at least. Go bowling, right? You have a great day of bowling, great afternoon. You think you figured it out. I know how to stand, block my body. I know just how to release the ball. Maybe I bowl 180, 190, which is good
Great
for
reference.
me.
Yeah.
I feel great.
Mm-hmm.
I figured it out. You feel like you had an epiphany. I figured out bowling. I finally figured it out. Next time you go bowling, 15 gutter balls, you bowl a 56. Your 5-year-old niece beat you by 10 points, right? You didn't figure it out. I feel like hard-boiled eggs, same exact thing. It's like, I figured it out this time. Here's the method, everybody. You ready for this? And I didn't. I'd be so disappointed if somebody figured this out first. But let's be honest. Somebody figured this out. But just give it to me.
Potentially thousands of years ago.
So now, listen. Here's what you do. You got your hard-boiled egg. Let it cool in the cold water. Let it cool off a little bit. Take the paper towel, hard surface. Let's say your counter surface. Take the egg, and now you got to channel the soft hands. Soft hands is important. You don't want to be a bull in the china shop, right? Think of like a soft hand, say like a shortstop in baseball.
Right.
They always say
hockey
right?
as well. Yeah.
Hockey, same thing, right?
Receive the puck with soft hands. Yeah.
Soft hands. So gentle touch, firm, but not too hard. Crack the egg and sort of roll it under your palm on the counter. Get those cracks throughout. Also, crack the top and the bottom. Just get it cracked, okay? Bowl of water. Could be the same bowl of water that you were cooling those eggs in. Put the now cracked egg, hopefully with that rolling motion, separates the skin from the egg itself, from the membrane, right? Put that in the water and then sort of take the egg on either side, long ways, and sort of scrunch it up so the water gets under that shell. You understand? Now it's submerged in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Now when you take it out, you have that water in between the shell and the outer edible part of the egg. It just peels like butter, my friend. And it works every time. I finally figured out a foolproof, consistent method for peeling eggs. And I feel like Martha Stewart probably discovered this 40 years ago. But for me, I never knew that. And I feel like it's a Martha Stewart worthy thing because it's, it's not like, I don't know, making a roast duck or duck l'orange or something that people can't relate to. It's something that we all do in the kitchen. Hard-boiled eggs, the easiest thing to make, right? So I wanted to share that. I was very excited about it, that I finally found a method 48 years in. Well, however long I've been making hard-boiled eggs.
You've been making them since you were a youth.
A youth. So that's what I was
good.
excited
That's because that is annoying. I totally agree.
Oh.
And the rare time, maybe like once a year, not even, I'll make like hard-boiled eggs. I'll just be like really in the mood. I'll make egg salad is typically like how it begins.
Egg salad.
I want egg salad because I fucking love
Perfect
egg salad. Oh my god. It's just eggs, pepper, and mayonnaise. I mean, I can like maybe some onion or something. It's like, how can you
put a little hot sauce in there?
Yeah, I mean, you can't do that wrong, but it does become frustrating. And then you can buy like the pre-shelled ones, which are kind of convenient but very expensive.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Like they come in like a bag.
That kind of nullifies my hard
but
work.
It's no, because not really. It's you're paying for the deshelled egg. I mean, this is the cheapest and most effective way, freshest way.
Those people must be really good at it. The people that are sitting there deshelling the.
You think it's a person? Yeah, but it must be. Yeah, I always assumed it was like some sort of violent machine that like, but somehow like didn't fuck the egg up. Like it's really rough.
A machine with soft hands.
But you can picture kind of like an Oompa Loompa or something doing it. Oh, very good.
What's going on with you, my friend? Do you have anything more exciting than eggs for me?
No, God, no, not at all.
Really?
It's funny, man. So I hooked up with this guy that does lawn. So I want to talk about my lawn for a minute.
Okay, please.
I live on a small plot of land. Just got myself a nice little lawn,
Sure.
and I love mowing the lawn. I don't know if I've said this before. Must have talked about it on the show. I've always loved mowing the lawn. I don't know why. I just like mowing the lawn, and it was really reinforced when I was on a professional landscaping crew at Northeastern during my college years. I was just like, this is awesome. I like doing this. Not that I wanted to do it for a living or anything, but you're outside, you're sticking around, you're planting bulbs and mowing lawns and sweeping up and
Something
raking
about that. So
and
appealing.
it is. And it's funny. Someone was asking me like, oh, what do you do when you go outside? Like, what do you listen to or whatever? And I'm like, I don't listen to anything. I literally just don't do anything except for like do the lawn or rake the lawn or do the mulch or
Be in
whatever.
nature.
Right. As nature driven as I am, I guess. But there's this guy in my neighborhood. He works at this local mom and pop kind of lawn care outfit. And his lawn looks awesome. So I finally last year, I don't want to say I think Micah did it, but we called and got these people on this like regimen. They come just once a month and they do something different to your lawn. And then they just leave a little tag on your door that say that they
Wait,
were there.
what?
And so like 1 month will be like they have like, this is like the primer or whatever. And then it's like this is the fertilizer and this is
Oh,
and
okay. Okay, yeah,
right. Then they treat it like in
Sure.
that little order. Nothing
Sure.
out of the ordinary. There are a lot of companies that do this, but these guys are fucking dominant. Like the best advertisement for this company is this dude's lawn. And so I called and lo and behold, I've gotten like 4 mows out of my lawn before anyone on my block has mowed their lawn one time.
What?
4 weeks.
That's huge. That's tremendous.
And it's I like my neighbors, but I'm embarrassing them. Like it's like I'm putting them all to shame. Now,
That's the
I will
point.
say I've said before, I live on clay. It sucks. You live on clay too.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
And so the genius builders here did a nice job with COVID times. They built all of our houses and stuff, but they didn't do a great job with the landscaping. They dug. You'll see when you're here. I've pulled mine out, but we have like this culvert kind of dipping through that splits up the properties.
Yeah.
And then it's lined by like pine trees that they planted, but they're all just dead because they just planted them in the clay and then they've slowly just taken them and removed them. And they just put the sod like on top of the clay.
Right.
So I had my shit just like dug up and like started again with this company that I love, local company. It's an amazing company. They put down, their 1 inch of this and they all this, and I started fresh. And then they're like, and I went to them like, so who you guys take care of this or whatever? And they're like, no, you need to talk to this guy. And it was that guy in the neighborhood, and it's crazy, man. I have like 3 or 4 trash bags worth of clippings to just in my trash can every week, and everyone else's shit is just not even growing. Like I'm like, I don't know what the hell this guy's doing, but it's got me loving being outside mowing the lawn more than ever. And I kind of got like a little low key competition going on with a few other guys. No, they don't know.
No,
but there's like,
well, they may,
but there's like a couple of guys that I know, like I see that I'm like, you care, right? Like, cause there's a lot of people that don't care for sure, or they have like someone else do it. And I'm like, I know you care. I know you care. I care. This guy cares, and so on and so forth. You kind of keep an eye on those guys. Root them on too. When I see them and I'm walking the dogs, I'm like, yeah, your lawn's looking great.
Oh, you push each other. Oh, yeah, man.
But I feel like I'm coming up, and so I like doing my little patterns. I do a hatch pattern where I mow one way and then I mow the other way, and it makes like a nice little
sewn up. Now you're lucky you enjoy it, that your
right.
grass is growing 4 times faster than some of your other neighbors.
Yeah, it's like it's a reason for me to be. I think it's hot right now. It's like 83 degrees right now.
Yeah, it's hot there today, right?
But yeah, it's a reason for me to be out there, and I've been enjoying that, and it's just been funny, and I've just been joking about it. I'd be like, I'm just embarrassing everyone. Look at my fucking lawn. It's just it can't be stopped. I have this regimen of I got this new sprinkler system that's like controlled on my phone, and
that's huge. The sprinkler
it's so cool.
Huge.
It's so cool, man. The builders use this like analog thing was probably cool in like the 90s or something, or in the early 2000s. I didn't even think that there would be an app for this. And then when I hired this other landscaping company, this just amazing landscaping company. They're called Hudgens, by the way. You guys should, if you're ever in Central Virginia, they're dope. Great company.
I feel like they might be beyond just like a local thing, that name. But maybe that's something else. I don't know.
Sure. I don't know. But they're really great here in like the guys I've dealt with. And they're like, oh, you can actually get this like new system in an app. And it's amazing. I know it's like, I'm sure people have been using it for years, but it's so funny. It's like you set up the times and the zones and stuff, and then it like tracks the weather and like makes adjustments. And it says like, it's too hot today, we're going to run you for another 10 minutes, or it's raining tomorrow, there doesn't need to run at all, and so on and
That's
so forth. It's
huge.
pretty cool. So
I
we have
love
we have it
that.
down to a science down here, because I have the tap feed water, the drip feed water in the
Sure, sure.
backyard. I got a lot of things going on right now. The yard's, it's coming together. So
I admire you, my friend. You know what's so funny? I love seeing you kind of entrenched in this whole suburban thing. It doesn't surprise me, but if I think back to even conversations with you, I don't know, 5 years ago, it was like, yeah, I'm fixing to go to Brooklyn,
yeah,
stuff like that, right?
yeah,
Then
definitely.
to see you like in suburbia in Richmond, suburban Richmond, it's in a pretty relatively rural place, not even like suburbia, super built up suburbia, relatively rural. It tickles me.
Yeah, it's fun. I enjoy it. I intentionally moved to a neighborhood. I definitely could have afforded more land and lived more secluded or whatever, but I know how I am, and so I need to be in a place where I see other people and like there's some sort of interaction. Otherwise, I think I'll just get lonely and detached from reality. So it's a nice place to live in. Yeah, I think I never imagined, because I was in California for so long, I was like, I can't afford a reasonable house in San Francisco or in LA. I guess I could have, but I would have been house poor and or living in a place I didn't really want to live in. And when I finally wrapped my mind around like, why don't you just buy a house, which you can fit your San Francisco and LA apartment in each 3 times over, and which costs half the amount that your rent costs. It literally, at some point, like it's impossible to justify. It was like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta like go buy a house. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't know why I didn't
So
do this
smart.
15 years ago, but
So smart, dude. I'm
rent.
proud of you. I was listening to this, just as a little aside. I was listening to this real estate agent being interviewed on NPR. I don't know which show it was last night, and she was saying like, if it's getting to the point where she feels so bad for people, because they'll come to her like, look, I could afford 1.8 million. This is in San Francisco. I could afford about 1.8. My only real thing is my thing that I can't bend on is that I need 2 bedrooms on the same floor. This is almost $2 million. And that's their barometer. Like that's
Yeah,
all
it's
they're
crazy.
looking for. And
It's
she's like,
crazy.
I can't do it.
Dude, San Francisco is out of control just because
It's
I don't
crazy.
think people say it, but I don't think they conceptualize why it is this way. It's because, and I saw it there over and over again as companies went public. When Facebook went public, for instance, 1,000 millionaires were made in San Francisco right that day. Now, imagine you have millions of dollars in your pocket,
Right.
and you just go and you're like, I'll just pay for this house in cash. Now, there's that happened now thousands of times over and over and over and over and over and over again.
So
I mean,
many times.
I knew so many people that got outbid just being like, I'll pay for cash. That 1.8 million, 2.5 million, 3.8 million, whatever it was. It's like, yeah, I'll just pay for it in cash.
Somebody wants it, you're fucked. And
Right.
somebody
And it's
always
like,
wants it.
and by the way, it's not a bad investment. I mean, in my opinion, to say like,
No.
if you have the liquid assets and you're like, I'm just going to buy this piece of land in a city that is 7 miles by 7 miles.
Is that
And
how big it is? Okay.
Yeah. And that's it. Very tiny place.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy this little square of it and I'll buy the house on top of it for $2 million, and I'll own this little piece of land of one of the most expensive cities in the world. I don't think that's a bad investment. That's what is so shitty about it, is like, it's not like you're owning anyone. It's like those guys not only got the house in cash, but they're like, yeah, all right, now my house is worth twice as much as it was when I paid for it in
Well,
cash.
that's the thing.
You know,
That's the
like,
whole thing. It's an investment no matter how you look. She was saying it's getting so bad now because the interest rates are starting to go up, so people are scrambling. So it's as insane as it's ever been. She called it surreal estate, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah, that's
how
great.
has nobody
That'd be a
coined
great
that
podcast
phrase yet?
That'd be a great podcast name, surreal estate.
So fun. Yeah, perfect, right?
Yeah.
And San Francisco's not the only one. New York was bad. Boston is notoriously very expensive.
Boston's apparently gotten very bad. Boston was somewhat affordable when I lived there. It's gotten pretty bad. I can't believe I lived there when I was 22 in an apartment with a couple people. It's like I don't. Boston, as I understand now, is just crazy.
I think it's like the San Francisco of the East Coast for sure.
Yeah, a lot of big companies there. So, but the interest rates are going up. They're going to go up quicker. They need to go up because inflation's so bad. So anyway,
exactly. That's the remedy, right?
Yes. Unfortunately, the remedy is really a recession. Unfortunately, but we'll see. We'll keep it upbeat for now.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right, Dake. Let's get into the topic at hand. And thank you all for your kind words out there. By the way, I know you guys. A lot of you say you enjoy these little talks. Some say it's the best part of the show. That's sad.
Should we just
All
do
right.
that for 2 hours?
I know, Jesus Christ, that would be a lot easier than the 17 pages of notes I was taking with Uncharted 2, but that is the topic today. Uncharted 2, Among Thieves, the smash hit 2009 PlayStation game that I remember very well. It came out the day before my birthday that year. And
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right. October, right?
yeah, October 13. We had it earlier.
October.
I wrote the strategy guide for it at IGN. Now
Oh,
this game, I wasn't writing reviews, like I wasn't an editor yet, like I would of IGN PlayStation. This was when I was still on writing strategy guides, but I was on Podcast Beyond at this time, so it's an interesting sort of mixture of that. But what's interesting about this game to me, and I don't know if a lot of other PlayStation fans know this intrinsically or feel it, this game may be the most important game that's ever been released on PlayStation. And it's a massive hit. Some people consider this one of the great games of all time. A lot of people consider this the greatest Uncharted game. You don't have the full breadth to make that determination yet. I
no,
personally
not
think the
yet.
third one's better, and we'll get there eventually. They're both great. They're both amazing games. But Uncharted 2 came out around the time that PlayStation 3 Slim came out. And this is important because PlayStation 3 Slim was the representation of the massive price cut from PlayStation 3, which began at $600 and $500 and then $400. And then finally, this model, people will remember we leaked it at IGN. This model had actually leaked out of like factories, like just walked off the floor. They were literally just loose in
Oh,
Malaysian fucking markets and shit like that. And everyone was like, what is this random? And it was crazy. People can go and read about it.
holy shit.
And it ended up being, people were like buying them loose with like a loose DualShock controller and shit. And everyone's like, what the fuck is this
What?
PS3? And it just, when Uncharted 2 came out, it was the time I think PlayStation put its flag in the ground and says like, we make better games than our competitor. And I say competitor in terms of Microsoft, because I think that even at this time, Nintendo was playing a different game. I think now Nintendo's definitely playing a different game. There's some crossover with Zelda and all of this, but when you look at games like Kirby and you look at Mario and you look at Animal Crossing, and that's just like its own thing. And then Sony and Microsoft really were competing hard at this time, and Xbox 360 was beating the shit out of PlayStation 3. And Uncharted 2 was the first game that I think demanded a lot of people's attention. Now, there were really great games before that. I would say Resistance Fall of Man was one of those games. Heavenly Sword was one of those games. I know a lot of people really liked Folklore. Of course, you have the original Uncharted game. You have others as well. So, and of course, there were a lot of dud second-party games like Layer and all this shit that people hated too. But amongst these games were just a Little Big Planet was in there. There were a few
Okay.
games that were starting to attract attention. Resistance 2. Then you finally get to Uncharted 2. And I feel like this game just blew the world apart. And I think really saved the PlayStation brand. I don't know that it's too dramatic to say that.
Sure.
That it's at the time, at the place, the new console, the new slim console, the new price, this game from this bubbling party. And we'll talk about Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog wasn't looked at the way it's looked at now. This was a game that people were like, holy shit, I had no idea you guys could do this. I mean, Uncharted 1 was, of course, great, but these guys were still well known for Jak and Daxter and Crash Bandicoot. No one really looked at them like this. So there's a lot riding on this game, and that's why I think it's so interesting to talk about. And it was voted on by our audience on KnockBack. You guys vote each and every month over there by supporting us, and you guys wanted us to do Uncharted 2, so we'll do it. And I'm curious, Dave, what did you think of the game? I mean, we have lots to say, but what are your top line thoughts, your elevator thoughts?
So glad you guys chose this game. I mean, wow. And I like that little tidbit about Naughty Dog too with Drake's Fortune with Uncharted 1. Yeah, it was a great game, but was that an anomaly? Did you guys get lucky? This is almost like proof positive, like, okay, you guys have something here. And, I said this with the first Uncharted, Kyle, and I'll say it with the second one. I'll echo the same sentiment. Fun in all caps. I just had such an amazing time. I found myself literally smiling from ear to ear while playing this game. Just so enjoyable, such a treat, just a joyful experience. And I really loved my time with it. I really lament one of those games we play for the podcast, but maybe even more so than almost any other this time, where it was like, I'm so sorry to see this come to an end. It was so much fun. And I love the first game as an introduction to Uncharted, into the world, an intro to the characters, the way things are going to work, but the atmosphere, all that kind of thing. But I love this game as an extension of the first, as a continuation, a proper sequel, a little bigger, more thrills, a proper blockbuster, just took Uncharted 1 and pushed out the boundaries. It just made it bigger, made everything on a larger scale, more set piece moments, more action. Just felt like playing a Michael Bay movie in all the best ways, though. I mean that in all the best ways. You know, sort of Indiana Jones meets Die Hard. I thought that minutes in. I was like, wow, this took everything in the game and just made the scope even larger. Maybe one of the best sequels I've ever played if you're just looking at 1 and 2. Now, again, I have to remind you guys, I haven't played Beyond 2 yet, and I can't wait. But yeah, just in looking at the first 2 games in a franchise, man, they did such an amazing job. And I just can't wait to crack this conversation. There's so much to say here. And may I say at the beginning too, and I almost feel bad for saying this because I love Naughty Dog and I love the characters in the game. They do a good job with the story. The voice acting is amazing, preposterously good, actually. But I don't remember ever playing a game where I actually gave less shits about the story. I just could not wait to keep playing.
Interesting.
That was the whole thing for me. It was like, yeah, the story's great, the character's great, ND is awesome. I love him. He's endearing, totally lovable, and everybody does a great job. There's so much this game is just gushing with positivity, right? But I just never remember playing a game where I'm just like, whatever, just let me at it. I just want to be immersed in this world. I don't care what's going on with the heavy and the betrayals and the double crossing and triple crossing and who's working for who and old allies, you know, stabbing each other in the back and all the amazing. But yeah, it was a singular experience for me in that I just wanted to have fun with it. And I feel like that is the tone of the game. It's just like a popcorn movie in game form.
Totally. Amy Hennig's a master. Also, shout out to Bruce Straley, who directed the game. And he, of course, would go on to co-direct The Last of Us. And, of course, is one of the people that saved Uncharted 4 when Amy Hennig left. So he doesn't get a lot of credit for this. But Amy Hennig's writing, pacing, of course, Neil Druckmann working on this as a designer, that there's a lot of love here. And what's amazing about Uncharted 2, and this is the craziest part, they made it in 2 years.
That's insane.
2 years. I mean, I don't even know how that's possible. I don't think you can make a game like this today in fewer than 4 years. And I think that that's even pushing it. The fact that they started Uncharted 1 Project Big in 2005 and they released Uncharted 3 in 2011. I mean, that's in late 2011. That's an incredible feat. And of course, Uncharted 4 was tortured, but that was because of a lot of drama behind the scenes. That was the fact that Naughty Dog saved that and that it's widely considered wonderful is another sign that the studio is great, but we're not there yet in our tale with Uncharted. So I wanted to start, and you're right, by the way, popcorn flick through and through. Interesting storytelling devices as far as splitting the narrative up and then meeting it back together, and we'll talk about that. We have to talk about the opening, which is, some people argue, maybe the most iconic opening in video game history. Stu Dog wrote in and said, "Howdy, bros. My question is mostly for Dagan. The opening scene in Uncharted 2 is iconic not only for PlayStation, but for the industry as a whole. Uncharted 2 changed the standards that cinematic video games still follow to this day. My question for you is, what other iconic video game opening sequences stand out to you as someone who hasn't dabbled as much in modern games? Any other games that instantly draw you into Naughty Dog, like Naughty Dog does so well?" The reason I wanted to pitch this is because in my mind, there is really no game that starts like this. And I'm curious what you think about that train sequence when you're hanging off the train and have no real knowledge of what's going on. Gets you involved right away. And I know I've said it. I mean, we're repeating it over and over again, but it really is like one of the most memorable, very up there with BioShock with its intro when you're going down to the city and others where it's like this. I couldn't wait. I didn't play through it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I actually watched a playthrough of it. I guess I'll just kind of put an asterisk right now. I've beaten this game no fewer than 10 times. I've platinumed the game on PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, so I beat it on normal, hard, and crushing on both the PS3 and the PS4. I wrote the entire strategy guide for it. I know this game frontwards and backwards. There was no reason for me to play it again. And in fact, watching the playthrough of it, I would skip through a lot of the gameplay, and I was like, man, I remember this like it was yesterday because I just played it so much because I was playing it blind. I had to find all the treasures and everything, so I was just playing stages over and over and over and over again trying to find these things. So I wanted to throw that out there. I have my bona fides with Uncharted 2, I think, are pretty well established. But
I think so.
But what did you think about this sequence? Did you know that the game started out like this? Because it's so well known. And tell me about your start with it.
Yeah, totally spoiler free. Jumping in, what a treat! I mean, jumping. It's almost like a great movie or a director whose hallmark is to jump right into the action. I always love that. I always kind of like just jumping right in. I love the formula of that. So jumping right into the action, almost like the ending of Michael Caine's Italian Job. You know, the vehicle's hanging off the cliff. Your protagonist is seemingly seriously injured, and already the wheels are turning. Like, what is happening? And having to play that, and then finding out pretty quickly that you're going to have to work back up to that point, but it's showing you halfway, a third of the way through, whatever it is, 2/3 of the way through, whatever that was. And I love that. I love starting the formula like that. And I love that a video game is saying, it's so funny that 2009 feels like so long ago. It's really not, but it just feels like ages ago. But I love these video game creators saying, like, we could just do everything a movie does. Like the great ones like Druckmann, like Kojima. You know, it's saying, okay, let's start it out. It's what could be more compelling than just jumping right into the action. And then I loved when you kind of realize that you're working your way back up to that point in real time in the game. What a great formula for storytelling.
It's
And
awesome because you're on the train, and we'll talk about the train when you're actually on it later in the game. You're on it for so long, and you know that what's going to happen is that the train is going to crash, and you're just waiting for it. And what's so funny is that it just never happens. Like, it just continues on and on and on and on, and it's wonderful.
absolutely waiting for that shoe to drop.
Right.
Great point.
It's pretty cool. I love that intro too. I watched it a couple of times over because I was like, man, I remember this so well. The train hanging off the cliff, clambering up, the first treasure you see in the corner, kind of the glimmer of it. And I love that they bounce back and forth between, immediately they start flashing back specifically to this beach bar, and they introduce two characters that we don't know yet, Harry Flynn and Chloe Frazer. Chloe ends up being a very important part of Uncharted moving forward.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. And sorry if that's a spoiler, but
She's fun character.
Yeah, she like Sullivan sticks around. She's kind of like the character you pick up in Uncharted 2, and there are more later. And Harry, of course, we know Harry meets his demise at the end of the game, but of course is an interesting character too. But we find Drake for the very first time in the real world. And I love this. And Dylan Tucker actually wrote in and kind of touches on this. I wanted to give him a shout out here. He says, "Hey boys, one of my favorite things about Uncharted is the feeling that the characters have real history and we don't know all of it. It makes the world feel so much more real. Clearly, Eddie Raja and Nate had history in the first game. Flynn and Chloe are the same. Just want to appreciate how perfect the writing is that you feel history between all the characters and you know exactly how they're feeling in only a few sentences. Nothing is better than Elena, who we'll get to later, being deeply offended that Chloe dismissed her. Did this stand out to you, and does it increase the storytelling for you as much as it does for me?" It certainly does, and it becomes immediately clear. Spreading the map out on the table, drinking the beers on the beach, a lot of casual stuff. I love Chloe being introduced as a driver. I think we've talked about that on past shows, how I love this idea of criminal enterprises having specialties. It's very G.I. Joe like. It's like she's the driver, he's the
best,
the tech guy, like mainframe, and this is the, very, very almost like Mission Impossible as well. And I really dig that they introduce her, and Harry's kind of like the connection to this mysterious benefactor. What did you think about kind of the sudden introduction of these two characters? In fact, we don't see much of Sully in this game at all.
Oh,
and
nope.
Which is, I know, one of the things that people complained a lot about, and it was a bummer. And we don't see Elena till later, and I love the way they wrote her in because it's brilliant. But what did you think about the introduction of these characters and kind of getting to know Drake outside of his relationship with Sully, outside of that island and that first game? This is the first time we're really seeing him outside of any of that. We last left him on the dock, right? Like,
right.
So what do you think?
Yeah, super fun. I love, Sully sort of bookends the game. We don't see a lot of him, and I love the relationship between Sully and Nate. That sort of mentor protege thing, but the protege is sort of becoming the master himself. I love that whole dynamic. And every character, it's true what Dylan said. They do a lot with a little, just in terms of exposition through dialogue. And you had mentioned the awesome dialogue writing in this and the awesome characterization. You get so much just from brief exchanges of the characters interacting. You see how the personalities work together, and you see, they'll bring up bits of their histories and their origins. And it feels very grounded. You feel like these characters have known each other for a long time. So that history just makes it even more fun and more compelling because you're wondering what they're going to get up to next. Also, when you're introduced to these characters in the beginning, And thank you for quantifying the fact that they introduced Chloe as a driver, because I thought I was going crazy at a certain point because I had remembered that tidbit. Like you, I kind of speak to that specialty thing. Who's the driver? Who's good at forging documents? Who's good at making bombs? Like, I love that whole thing.
Yeah, it's good. It's awesome.
So
very
cool.
Kojima also. Yeah.
It is very Kojima. And I think because we grew up loving that same stuff, that fuels the content.
Right.
But you never do see her drive. So it's nice to know that maybe, well, it's nice to know we'll see her again in future iterations. But I love that. I love just the kind of brief exchanges that the characters have, and so how much you could do through just creating dialogue and seeing these characters interact. It's a lot of fun. That's why I feel bad almost, because again, like you said, Colin, there is a lot of TLC there. There's a lot of loving craft to really making these characters believable and making them fun and making them appealing, I think. So I always feel bad for saying, like, just let me get into the action. But you probably wouldn't, in all fairness, want to jump in and really entrench yourself in the game if you didn't like these characters.
I'll also say,
it's so fun.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to say that it's very reminiscent of Indy, in my opinion.
Very much so.
Indiana Jones, I mean, I could tell you what the 3 Indiana Jones, well, I don't acknowledge the 4th one, but the 3 Indiana Jones movies, we can talk about what they're about, but it's really about moments and character, and it's different. I kind of feel like this is a playable version of that in a deeper way than the obvious Tomb Raider, Uncharted kind of influence that's here. So I don't really begrudge you that. It's much more strange that you played BioShock without listening to any of the audio diaries. I don't know how.
Yeah,
that must have been some experience.
But the first BioShock, I've come a long way since then, though. You have to.
No, you definitely have. You definitely have. You're doing great. So the story, as we learn through Flynn and Chloe, is surrounding Marco Polo, the 11th century explorer, and this Mongolian oil lamp that he apparently brings back from the Far East, and they need it. Now, what I find so interesting about this is, and they touch on this in the first one, but they touch on it again here in a bigger way, which I love, is that Drake's really smart. And I like that they play into this. He speaks 12th century or 11th century Latin. He can read it, and he understands inherently when he looks at the Mongolian oil lamp. He's like, this thing is worthless. Like, he just knows that it's not worth all the trouble, that there's got to be more to it. I like that they kind of play this up, the story of the 13 missing ships, and the lamp is the key, and all of the rest. And it begins as this kind of, like you said, a heist. So we get right into the action. And one of the cool things about the gameplay here that shines for the first time in Uncharted is stealth. It's not really very complicated, but the game requires you not to blow your cover. So it has pretty good stealth mechanics, which is, when you compare games to other games in 2009, it does it pretty well. So what did you think about this entire idea of beginning with a heist, going after this kind of mysterious, worthless oil lamp? Obviously, there's much more intrigue about what it really is. And did you have this feeling that you were going to be betrayed by Flynn or Chloe? Because at this point, you don't really know Chloe really as a friend. You don't really trust her the entire game the first time, I imagine. I don't really remember what it's like.
Yeah, sure. No, I think you're right.
So what did you think about that whole setup with Marco Polo going to Istanbul, breaking into the museum, working with these kind of characters that there is history with? How did you find that all?
Oh, I thought it was super fun. Breaking into the museum in Istanbul and sort of running afoul of the guards. And I do like the fact that they clearly ramped up the stealth. Like, stealth is a little more part of the equation now than the first game. I liked introducing that because you still have the overt combat as well. So it gives you the best of both worlds. And I did see the Chloe character as a potential femme fatale in the beginning. I was like, wow, this character is definitely feels like it's kind of setting you up to believe that this character is not on the up and up. And this is possibly one to watch out for as far as betrayals and backstabbings and all that kind of stuff. And then the Flynn character too. I didn't see that. I just saw that as a fun thing. Like, okay, Drake has a proxy now instead of the older Victor mentor character. It's sort of a colleague, another, part of Nate's posse, and not a rival, not a Belloc type character in this case, someone that's sort of working in tandem with him, and also misleading in the fact that I didn't think Flynn was going to become one of the heavies or one of the bad guys. I certainly wasn't thinking that from the beginning. It was kind of cool to see Nate working with his contemporaries.
I enjoyed it too. I was trying to, when I was watching it, and by the way, we were just sitting on the couch watching it, and I was taking notes. I took copious notes, but we were getting so pulled into it. I was actually looking over and watching Micah could just get pulled, like, we were just watching it, like as if it was a film. It was that impressive, even just watching someone else play it. It was
It
amazing. And
holds
also, I
up.
picked up my controller multiple times, like after a cutscene, to like play. Like, like when a cutscene ends and you can see the
I've
camera
done
like zooming back in, and I like would pick it up and be like, oh yeah, I'm not
I've
actually
done
playing
that
the game.
many times watching stuff on YouTube. Yeah, I can speak to that.
So I really enjoy how they bounce back and forth between, because it's not, they don't begin with the train sequence and then bounce you back these months and then just work your way up. You're actually bouncing back and forth a little bit, which is cool.
Yeah.
And eventually we find this Tibetan furba, the knife in the snow. That's another iconic shot of Drake crawling towards it, picking it up and finding it. It ends up being this really important key. What do you think about this? This thing seems like it's going to be a MacGuffin. I was thinking about this. I actually wrote this in my notes. It seems like it was going to be so unimportant, but it ends up being this really vital thing that is dragged from near the beginning of the game all the way through to the end. What did you like about having that kind of device to focus on? It seemed like it was a distraction, like it wasn't going to be important, but it ended up being vital. And it's so funny how loose they treated it at times, especially with Schaefer later on.
Yeah, you know what? That's a really good point. I don't think I thought about it like that, but now thinking about it in retrospect, it does seem a little MacGuffin-ish because it's introduced so early. It's like, how can they already have that important artifact? That can't be important. But it does become, this relic does kind of hang at the center of the story for a lot of it. And he's using it deep into the game to access the various temples and the traps and overcome the various things and solve the riddles and the problems and all the puzzles. So that was a lot of fun. And I just love the whole thing of, I'm fascinated with Aztec, Mayan, whatever it is in this case, that the ancient relics, the ancient temples, the way these things were built, the potential booby traps. So, and again, that could be growing up with Indiana Jones and that sort of serial B movie formula. Even cartoons and stuff that we grew up with always had it. Look at Scooby-Doo, right? They're in some ancient tomb or something.
Mm.
So it's fun to see that. And also I love, Kyle, that early on we find out, much like the first game, that you sort of have these real world elements, actual people that existed, for instance, Marco Polo, and sort of tying that in with their own fictional touches to create this, again, world building that is believable, but also very fun and very cartoonish and very, really there's no limits to what you could do with that, which I think is, at the center of that. It just makes for a good time with the characters, with the quest, with the baddies. It's nothing overtly cerebral or complex. It's just good stuff, good solid stuff.
I think an important thing that they add to this game as well that gives it texture is this kind of idea of globetrotting. And GameSimp wrote in and said, "Hey, Dad and Uncle, how do you feel the setting of Among Thieves compared to Drake's Fortune? This entry introduces the globetrotting structure of future games where Drake and company hop from setting to setting in a rather sporadic fashion. Drake's Fortune, however, maintains one isolated setting, the island, that receives deeper exploration and storytelling. While it's no
Sure.
Bioshock, I think that Uncharted 1 setting feels like a character itself. I'm curious if you feel like there was something missing here, or if you liked the idea of going from place to place. We, of course, begin with the snow and we're bouncing back and forth to the beach, and then we're in Istanbul, and then we go to Borneo, and then Nepal and Tibet and all this stuff. So there's a lot of globetrotting. You don't really get to see any one place too deeply until later. I think you see Nepal pretty deeply, but
Yeah, that's
what
true.
did you think? How did you think? What did you think about that kind of contrast between the first game, wherein they removed the idea of having a character like a Resident Evil mansion or something, and instead put you in these different stages?
That is a really great point, because when you do have one location like Drake's Fortune, you get to really explore the atmosphere of that place. And it does take on, the location takes on a character, because you're getting to know that place, you're getting steeped in it. And having a formula where you could go from place to place, you could see that would rob you of that dynamic. But I love, again, the progression from 1 to 2. And I gotta say, it's irresistible. That formula of being able to be whisked anywhere in the world and just kind of taking off the boundaries and just saying, like, we're just gonna tear the ropes off. We could do anything and we could go anywhere. There's something very fun in that. And I could see a developer in sort of fleshing out a franchise wanting to do that for the next iteration, especially if they felt like artistically and technologically they were capable of doing that now. So it is a very logical progression. I think just, again, irresistible fun to be able to say we could go anywhere and do anything, and let's do that. And there's something very exciting about that rhythm and that pace, and just being able to go anywhere and just being at a place long enough, then we're going to the next thing. And also that contrast. You're in the, you're in the cities of Nepal, you have the urban warfare, you have the snowy cliffs, you have the beaches, you have inside these massive temples, sprawling temples. So you have a little bit of everything. It just works again in that. I always call it that Return of the Jedi perspective. It's like you get a little bit of Dagobah, a little bit of Endor, a little bit of outer space, a little bit of Tatooine. So I love that.
Yeah, I do too. It's almost inexplicable because you wonder, like, how did they get here? What did they do? What was their plan? But it's not really important. That would be more for like a novelization of Uncharted, which would be interesting in and of itself, of course. But I want to ask you about some of these characters. We had brought up some of them already. Adam Razik wrote in and said, Chloe is a fantastic character and a brilliant addition to the series. That's all I have to say. Cheers. What did you think of your time with Chloe Frazer? And speaking of what we were talking about earlier with these characters having a history, we learned that Nate and her dated, it seems like. It seems like Nate broke up with her at some point. By the way, we always talk about tasteful or not tasteful sex scenes. I do like the tasteful scene with them in the hotel where the camera just pans up to the painting. And I like the comment later where she's like, the hotel, she's trying to like get them to the hotel because it's like, and he's like, now's not the time. It's very, very funny. So very tastefully done. But what did you think about your introduction to Chloe?
Good shit. It's so nice to have another memorable female character in the franchise. And also, I have to say, so happy that she turned out to be on the up and up, because very likable. And in the beginning, you're thinking, okay, love triangle. You got Flynn, you got Nate, you got Chloe. And then later on, you're thinking love triangle with Elena, Chloe, and Nate. But it never really pans out in any fashion like that. Again, sort of kind of misleads you a little bit in a fun way. But I love the fact that the character is a proper payoff. And when you kind of realize that this character is a quote unquote good guy, you're definitely, really happy to see her pop up. And I love the way she moves in and out of the story too. She's not always there because she's infiltrating the baddies, the Lazarovichs, I guess, posse. So she's kind of like the inside man. And it's again super cool. My only regret, not being able to see her drive, because she's obviously a badass driver. That's her specialty.
Yeah, she you see her drive like the boat, and that's it. And then
Right, that's true.
And then, but then she
That
says
counts.
that she's supposed to be waiting for them in the van, so that was what she was actually there for. But we never actually see that happen.
Never get to see that.
It's funny because we were talking about in the previous conversation about Drake's Fortune, the parallels between the relationships between the bad guys and the good guys, and I feel like there's another kind of interesting parallel here in that Flynn is like a poorer version of Drake. Like, he does read some of this Latin, he does know some of the history, he is on, kind of like he's a treasure hunter too. He's just not as talented. And I like that they kind of drew the contrast between Chloe not knowing anything. In fact, she's kind of the proxy for the character because she's always asking questions. She's like, what are you talking about? I hate when he does that. Blah, blah, blah. While Flynn is kind of like a know-it-all and is being used by Lazarovich just for his very basic, knowledge of the situation that might be able to help Lazarovich get what he wants, which is this power. And it's worth noting that, of course, we learn through a very cool scene at the museum in Istanbul when they break it open and they use the resin for the fire and they look at the map and all, very Uncharted, Indiana Jones, Tomb Raider kind of shit.
Good point.
And it's good stuff. They discover that, there's seems to be a cursed treasure at so-called Shangri-La, and they want to kind of go and find it, but it's on behalf of this interesting villain. And Hidari Shitaro wrote into us and said, hey there, Chintamani Colin and Damn Dorado Dagan.
Nice.
How did you feel about this entry's cast of villains? While I love Talbot's dynamic with the crew, I felt a little overwhelmed by Lazarovich's over-the-top cartoony nature. However, his dynamic with Chloe is one of the best character arcs in the game. I appreciate you both and keep on bringing hookers to church. I don't know what that means. But thank you. Hidari Shitaro, thank you for writing
That is
in.
a quote from something. What is that hooker in church quote?
I don't know.
I'll have to think on that.
All right. So what did you make of the villains here? We have, obviously, I guess that we should really just say villain because we've already talked about Flynn, but what did you think about Zorin Lazarovich, this sort of Eastern European character? It's funny, man. I used to kind of think that he was a lame, like one of the lamer parts of this game when I was
Yeah.
younger. But in watching it and kind of absorbing it, I was like, I don't hate this character at all. I think what I was kind of bouncing it off of and absorbing was the negative energy I felt towards the last boss fight, which I think is stupid.
Mm,
And I still think that fight's stupid. I just hate the idea of even Uncharted having last boss fights, and you can tell that they were struggling with how to end the game
yeah,
when
I
they
hear
really
that.
could have ended it without that fight, just in this crazy setup as everything's crumbling and crashing and they're just trying to escape. So I think I was kind of like melding that together. But actually, I like this character. I love his fucking shotgun on his back. I dig, and I wrote this down specifically. I dig the upside down dagger, like the upside down knife that some
Oh yeah.
soldiers have, like or
Yep.
GI Joes and stuff have on their chests and all that. So I kind of like his look, and it's interesting because he's influenced by this idea of absolute power. Like he just wants this absolute power, and the game's alternate history suggests that this power was tasted in some different way by people like Kublai Khan and Genghis Khan and certain other conquerors, but was never truly harnessed. And we of course discover that the Nazis were after it as well through Schaefer, which we can talk about. But what did you think about Lazarovich and kind of his motivation, which is pretty single-minded, and I don't think maybe the deepest. In fact, I would argue that the first game is a little more sophisticated in this way.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of proof in the pudding, right? Perfect example of the game not really doing anything metaphysical or too heady, just really just a fun quest. Lazarovich feels like a campy sort of throwback to a typical 80s Russian, Serbian villain that we would
Right.
see, the things that we grew up digesting. And I kind of like that formula, though. It's just, again, fun. He's kind of that would-be Genghis Khan or Stalin or Hitler, like somebody who's after this thing, not for riches, but for invincibility,
Right. He calls all those
indestructible
guys great
power.
men, by the way. He calls them all great men.
Right. So he's kind of like a descendant or a would-be protege of these, you know, horrible, some of the most horrible people that ever lived. So a proper baddie, some a force to be reckoned with. And I like the imagery too. You know, that sawed off shotgun on his back, slung on his back. You're waiting for him to use that knife that's bigger than I am. Like you, I kind of go in for that imagery. It just feels like Cobra. You know, it feels like the stuff we grew up with. It's a lot of fun. And I think I can't help but think that stuff is fueled by, you know, this game is made by people our age. You know, it's kind of fueled by them growing up and digesting that stuff too. And I have to say, Kyle, a nod to the Flynn character that I kind of realized at a certain point. Again, they didn't go too far with this character, but he was fun in that he kind of felt like the darker version of Nate, right? He's got the swagger. He's a fun, charming dude. He's got the charisma, but at the center of it, and you're getting a little more substance from Nathan Drake now. And we see that it's not about the riches with him. It's about the quest and the passion and that genuine curiosity, the knowledge. He's a student of history. That's really what makes him tick. Where the Flynn character, it's really greed and darker ambitions at the center of what's motivating him. So it's kind of like two sides of the same coin. That's why it would have been kind of cool to see him live, I think, because it would be kind of cool to see a rivalry. I guess what they're really saying is that he didn't have the tools to live in a world like this. You have to be more like Nathan Drake in order to survive this type of lifestyle or whatever. Can't have the wrong-headed pursuits. But I think it would have been kind of cool to see. We never really see that in an action adventure serialized franchise like this, like indie, right? Where it's like he doesn't really have that rivalry with somebody of his own age, of his own ilk. It's different. Belloc's older, you know, indies. So it's like it's a different thing. And I think that formula would actually be really fun. And I can't think of another fictional franchise that does that. So that would have been kind of neat, I think.
What did you think about the inclusion of the Nazis through Schaefer and all the rest of it? Did you feel like that was pertinent? I mean, we were making fun of it a little bit in the first one with the U-boat. I mean,
Right.
those visuals are awesome. The U-boat in the jungle is a cool visual, but it's
So
just
cool.
that is so indie, and I forgot about that actually. When I even saw Schaefer, I was like, what was the angle with him and his expedition? And I didn't remember, and I was like, oh
It gets a little
god,
confusing.
I was like, why did I make fun of this more at the time? I don't remember that. I would definitely want to make fun of it now. I'm excited to get to Uncharted 3 because this almost reinforces, although this is a wonderful game, that Uncharted 3 is better.
Oh, wow, that's exciting to
I
hear.
can't. Uncharted 3 has like one of the great. Oh my god, I can't.
Oh, I cannot wait to.
There's so many. There's so many good parts of that game. But let's stay here for now. What did you make of the inclusion of the Nazis?
Well, my first thought was, "Oh, they're going to the well again
Mm,
with this." As soon as they mentioned that, I was like, "Well," in the first one we talked about it, I didn't really mind it. I liked the fact that it was a throwback to indie and, a clear sort of nod to the world that it's, um, inspired by. But doing it again in this one, it was like, okay, I guess it seemed unnecessary. It didn't really bother me though, and it does get a little confusing, the whole woven tapestry of the game, not just the way the treasure hunt sort of changes course, but the way the players come in and out and the origins and the backstory with Marco Polo and what really happened and the different geographic locations and all of that. I don't think that was helped by my sort of incessant feeling of just like, all right, I don't care. Like, I just let me explore this temple. Let me enter into combat again. That combat sequence on the train, for instance, was so satisfying. I just wanted to keep doing that kind of stuff. A nice, really, I love the rhythm, like the first game, going between those platforming segments and the combat segments. Little bit more stealth to make it even a little more interesting. The puzzle sequences, I love all that. I love the way it kind of moves and the
w-
rhythm and the pacing of everything. So that's really what I wanted. I really felt like the story was getting in the way a little bit. Not so much the characters, because I love them, but the story was getting in the way. So that wasn't helping me this time. I was very sort of ADD about just like, let me get my fingers dirty. Let me get my hands dirty. I want to get back into it.
well,
So, and you know what, the other thing too, the game scared me a little bit. I was thinking about this in my notes. The first hour or so, I feel like the game sort of steals away control. The game takes over pretty frequently. You play a little segment and the game takes over with a cinematic or a cutscene, and the game takes the wheel for pretty frequently. And I was like, oh my God, I hope the whole game is not like this, because you understand the scale and the enormity of what they're doing compared to the first game with the locations and the way they're, the chases and all these dynamic things that are happening. But luckily, the game sort of lets go and relinquishes that at a certain point in, and then that rhythm really takes off from that point. I'd say about an hour in. So, but the game scared me. I was like, whoa, is this going to be a lot different than the first game? Because I loved it. I
yeah.
loved the first game so much.
There's no combat really. I mean, there's some stealth combat, but there's no meaningful combat. In fact, Drake is conspicuously anti-violent in the beginning of the game, which I found really to stand out. It's like, why the fuck do you care? And I think Flynn even says that too. It's like, who are you, dude? You've killed so many people, and obviously Lazarovich confronts him with this later on, which is one of the
He
great ironies
does.
of Uncharted, which is cool.
I
I
love
think
that.
it's I think it's necessary. I think that someone at some point has to acknowledge that Drake is not who he purports to be. Although I want to talk about Drake's true nature later on as well, but in terms of the combat, it's funny because you're right. The game eases into this Istanbul thing where you're just sneaking around, you're kind of killing some dudes. If you get seen, the game restarts or the chapter restarts from the last checkpoint and all the rest. And it's not until Flynn betrays you really that you have any real combat. And I want to say that's the fourth chapter or something. So
Yeah,
it
I
does
think you're
start
right.
slow,
Yeah,
but I think it's a good burst once you get going on the gameplay. And I was curious. I wanted to ask you, what did you think about the gameplay? That this is obviously a major step up. I mean, you seem to have really enjoyed this third person cover based shooting. So talk to me about playing it.
I loved it, dude. I just love it so much. It makes me think, because I'm relatively inexperienced with third person and first person shooters. Is it just that I just don't have a lot of experience with a lot of them yet? But I just love it. I just think it's just like the first game. It's just enough juggling between two weapons. They improved the nuance of the grenade mechanic in this one a little bit, so we have that. And it's introducing a couple of new things. The cover was a little smoother. The control was a little smoother. It was a little easy to get in and out of cover. I liked. And then little things that they add, like the propane tanks and things like that. Just if you want to go in that direction with the combat and the fighting and experiment with those things, you can. Just enough to maintain the amount of weapons, getting ammunition, restocking, sort of managing your loadout, just enough to be interesting without being too complicated or obtuse. And I kind of marvel that this game, especially, I felt this way in the first game, but even more so with number two, that not just the gameplay, but the difficulty. I played on normal. the difficulty was just so for me that I felt like it was pretty close to perfection in that it was easy enough, again, to be inviting and make you want to play. And I couldn't wait to sit down, kids go to bed and play every night for 6 or 7 nights in a row. But also difficult enough to propel you with a little bit of challenge and sort of entice you to keep moving forward. I have never, I don't remember playing a game that was, we played a lot of great ones already on KnockBack, but I don't remember a game that felt this good at that, especially on the normal difficulty where, and maybe it's just perfect for me, for my skill level and my experience, but I really had a great time. And at a certain point, I was like, wow, they really went to great pains to lovingly craft this difficulty to make it feel very satisfying, nearly perfect, as perfect as I've ever played in a game. Now, how does it stack up for you, Kyle? Because you've played much more. Your breadth of games is your body of the games you've played is a lot larger.
Yeah, the Uncharted games are controversial because they're not shooter first games. First of all, I think you're experiencing what I experienced 15 years ago or so, which is that I really like shooters. Like, I really like them. I think maybe you should just embrace it. You might like the genre. I think it kind of gets a bad rap. It's also was a very PC centric genre. It wasn't something we were really exposed to properly
Right.
for many generations on console.
Sure.
So we all came to it, I think, a little later. I think most people have come around now, but shooters are amongst my favorite things. I fucking love Wolfenstein. I love Doom. I love The Division and all this kind of stuff. And Micah does too. She plays Call of Duty constantly and Gears of War. So it's a really wonderful genre.
Yeah.
It's controversial because it's not quite as tight as its contemporaries. So 2009 would be like Gears of War 2, moving into almost 3 a couple of years later. And then you have other games like Kill Switch and Black, I guess, some similar games in the PS2 era and into the PS3 era. But I feel like the game feels really good. And what's funny is that Uncharted 2 was the first game to introduce multiplayer which is a mainstay now, and was in 2, 3, and 4. So I think it was tight enough to have not only some competitive multiplayer aspects, which were very popular, but also this would later more be introduced in a major way, but kind of like horde mode style PvE sort of things that you can do as well with a partner or by yourself. So I think the gameplay stands out. I like the explosives. I like the grenades. I don't think the AI is incredibly smart, which I think is effective for a game like this. There, in watching the different gameplay and kind of focusing in on the different set pieces, there's that set piece when um, you are with Sully and he's covering you with the sniper rifle and you're kind of like gathering all the evidence from one of Lazarovich's like huts. That's like a really frenetic and fun section of the game. You brought up the train, which we'll talk about
Oh,
momentarily because that's a really important part of the game. But even when you get to the temples and you're like climbing up the temples and looking for Schaefer's men and all of this, and you're fighting the Yeti looking creatures that are actually just people in disguise, very The Village, M. Night Shyamalan type thing. Spoiler, sorry. Um, so let me ask you about the going to the Southeast Asia sort of stuff before we get into the specifics of more of the gameplay and some of these awesome parts like the train. What do you think about exploring Nepal and Tibet and these kinds of areas that of the world that I find quite fascinating? Because there's something about even the language, whatever it is, the text that they write, it it's visually representative to me of this melding of Asian and I guess what you would call maybe Indian or subcontinent kind of sensibilities. So, like when you look at an Asian text and you can say like, I can look at Japanese, Chinese, Korean, etc., and I can tell you what they are. Vietnamese, like I can tell you what each of them are. It's no problem. I can't
right.
read them, but you can just
Right.
tell.
Right. Right.
Korean has circles in it, and Vietnamese look like this, and all the, and you can kind of see like like the evolutionary models that they would show where it's like the ape and he's walking and he's walking and he's walking and then he's human and in between there's like all these interstitials of like the ape
Sure.
who's kind of a human and the human who's kind of an ape and I look at the language specifically and all the writing and the culture, the flags, the colors, the statues and statuettes and the carvings. It's like this melding of from a layman's perspective, I don't know anything about this part of the world really, maybe more than the average bear, but not very much. It's like it's the perfect mixture of Indian and Asian, and there's something very appealing about it. Plus, it's not the proper use of the word alpine because it's not in Europe, but it's very alpine. Like I like the mountains, I like the snow, I like the craters and the valleys and the sharp edges and I don't know. There's something about this part of the world that I really love. This is the most memorable part of the game to me, is that it takes place in this section of the world. Like, do you know those colorful flags that are all stitched together that
Yeah,
are, I think,
sure.
I don't know if they're Nepalese or from Tibet, but that was the first time I had ever seen that. And I was like, that's what that is. I had no, you know, when we talk about how games teach you things like all the time, like
Yes,
words and shit, that was like when
absolutely.
I was like, oh, that's what that, the only reason I know what that is because of Uncharted 2. So talk to me about exploring this part of the world. And if you kind of vibe with this idea I had, which is it's not quite Asian, but it's not quite Indian. It's its own thing. And that's really cool. And it's funny how it's so visually representative of these two cultures physically colliding in this space.
That's a great point. That's a really, really great point. It does feel like that. And I think it always did, even dating back to the late 70s, early 80s with Raiders. And I love the way Nepal is a direct nod to Raiders. And just having that sort of exotic, those colorful locales, and having Nate somewhere in places now coming out of the first game that are inhabited places, but not part of the Western world. So you still have sort of, you could be in a village where people dwell, or you could be in a downtown area or hotel in a part of this world. So you having that sort of urban warfare thing component, but also in an exotic place. So it's a great sort of meshing of the two things. And in the first game, I think, as I remember, the only indoor places you were allowed to explore or do combat or do the platforming was in the temples and stuff like that. So now to be in somebody's apartment, be in somebody's hut, to be in a hotel building, be on the top deck with the bar, the roof bar, and the pool and everything like that. So fun, so memorable, and really made the game, the scale of the game, feel large. You know, when you're on that rooftop pool area and you're about to rappel down and all of these other things, like it's just, it feels massive. You know, it feels like you could look for miles. And I wonder how, you know, for me, it holds up. I think it's beautiful. The one thing this game did, Kyle, is for me is, and it occurs to me when I play games, certainly when we watch movies and watch TV shows too, but especially with games, if something is, if the overall experience is not taking you out of that experience, in other words, if the graphics are working, if the animation is right, if the atmosphere feels believable, if the mechanics of the game feel smooth and fluid, in other words, just letting you enjoy the experience and really letting you get immersed. That's what this game did for me. In fact, I would stop and look around and be like, wow, holy shit, like let me stop, I'm enjoying myself so thoroughly, let me just stop for a second and look at this vista. You know what I mean? The graphics hold up. There's, you know, you're having environmental impact in the rainy puddles and through the snow and the way it's getting on Nate's pants and all of that kind of thing. But you realize like everything is just working in tandem, the design, the animation, the atmosphere, the you know, the particles, the effects, the music, the sound effects, everything's working in tandem to just give you this experience. And you're almost taking all of those lovingly crafted things for granted. This game really did that for me. And I couldn't help but think, like, wow, this really holds up 13 years on. How well it really holds up. And that really just speaks to how good the game must have seemed when it came out in October of 2009. I can only imagine.
Oh yeah, we were enamored with this game, especially because it looks so much better than the original one. Like and in my history of Naughty Dog that I did, they talk about how Uncharted 2 is a chance for them to kind of fix. I mean, that's the amazing thing is that they did it in 2 years and they look at it as like, oh, we can finally like fix things and do what we want to do. It's like, how did you make? I still don't understand how they made the game so quick. It's
That's
fucking
insane.
it's insanity, and they did it again with Uncharted 3, which was also made in 2 years.
That was two
So
years. Wow.
and then they made The Last of Us. I mean, at that point, Uncharted, it doesn't matter, but Naughty Dog split into two teams at that point. So Naughty Dog had
Okay.
Uncharted 3 and The Last of Us in development at the same time. That's when Justin Richardson came in and directed that game, and that's a whole thing. We'll get to that at that point. But I look at Uncharted 2. It's funny because it reminds me, and we said this over and over again. There are so many moments in gaming where it's like it can't get any better than this. When's it ever going to look any better than this? I think this is running on PS3 in like 720 or something like that. It's like when is it ever going to get better than Uncharted 2? When is it ever going to get better than BioShock? And now we're playing games like I was playing Forbidden West, the New Horizon game, and it's like, holy fucking mackerel, man.
I can't
I
wait
mean,
to crack that
it's
one.
it's nuts. I mean, I don't even know. You have to play it on a 4K TV. You have like an OLED TV. It's just it's so necessary. The darkest blacks and the whitest whites, and it's just so beautiful. And it's just funny how this medium, much like film, I think challenges you over and over again to check your expectations. Be like, oh, that's nothing. Like I remember when I saw 2015, I think it was 2015, Mad Max, that
Okay.
Fury Road movie. I don't know if
Fury
you saw
Road,
that or
sure.
not. Yeah, I walked out of that theater and I was like, that is the most incredible thing I have ever seen in my entire life. And I
Visual
still feel like it
masterpiece.
is like one of the most
Yeah.
incredible feats of practical filmmaking I've ever seen in my entire life. But one day I think that someone will come out of nowhere and be like, oh, um, look at this.
Yes.
And I feel like that's Uncharted 2 in a lot of different ways. And there are other games and there are other products that will do that. But I always think about Mad Max when I was like, holy mother of God. How did you do that? I couldn't even believe how good that movie was.
It's amazing.
For as good as everyone said that movie was, it's even better.
Yeah.
And and I think that
Yeah.
and I think that people say that I think that people feel that way about Uncharted 2. So there's a little bit of a connection there. But though
That's
I
awesome.
know that character is more important to you than story, I'm wondering what you thought about the voice performances. We haven't talked about Elena yet. We will, but what did you think about Nolan North and Claudia Black and all these guys? I just, Steve Valentine does Harry Flynn. You said like it has almost no, I think you said it's absurd or something, like it has no right to be as good as it is. This is the stuff you get from motion capture and
Yes.
making your characters act outside of a booth. It's just the way it is. And in fact, I'm playing Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker saga right now, and I keep making fun of it to Micah because first of all, the voice acting, like everyone's a little bit off. Like it's like a bad impression of Jar Jar Binks and like a bad
Okay.
impression. Qui-Gon
I
Jinn
love
sounds
that.
like Sean Connery for some reason. I have no idea why that is. But I was telling her, I'm like, listen to the NPCs. They definitely didn't do what I'm going to complain about with the main characters, but I'm like, listen to the NPCs. Like, this sounds like a dude recorded this in his closet because it was during COVID. Like, there are all these concessions being
Okay.
made. And
Yes.
you can tell because our expectations are higher now in gaming. In 2009, they weren't very high. So this was extraordinary, not only from an animation standpoint. It doesn't, Drake doesn't look beautiful. It does not fantastic, but it just comes out the way they interact. The ending between Nolan and Emily when they're kind of jibber jabbing back and forth. I wonder if that's even just totally, impromptu. So,
Yes.
what did you think about the performances, specifically Drake? Who, shout out to Nolan North. I just think he's so wonderful. He's just
Oh,
such
he's so good,
he
dude.
rules.
I
He's
mean,
just a great guy.
it's not hyperbole. Like that guy is just masterful at voiceover. Yeah, the voices to a person are amazing in this game. They lend so much gravitas. And you're right, there's a real naturalism to the recording. And I love Naughty Dog's commitment to watching the making of stuff for Uncharted 2. They had a real commitment to the voice actors recording in the same room and that interaction, which is not fashion forward for me. That's right headed. You want to have a natural conversation and dialogue and feel like these characters know each other and there's a relationship. Get them recording in the same room. These are actors. So beautifully written lines could wash up against really awesome improving. And you have that sort of richness when you set up your recording like that. And it's really, really important. And, I think also with the animation in this, how well it held up for the broad action, for the running and the jumping and the shooting and the hiding and the somersaulting and all that kind of stuff. Really well done. But yeah, the mocap blended with the animators sort of taking the baton beyond the mocap. Really rich and nuanced acting in this, very believable, and a very nice blending of the voices with that natural acting. Very believable acting that you would very, very rarely see in a game. Now, of course, you have the uncanny stuff with the faces and things like that. You're talking about a game that's 13, 14 years old now. That's inevitable. You have that evolution and we have that barometer. We have that keen eye, 2022 eye, but it holds up remarkably well. And I think they did a great job of even taking that uncanny stuff and sort of hiding it where they could and just really making for an experience that holds up over a dozen years later. That's hard to do. We talk about that a lot on the show, but really beautiful. And the voice acting, just again, to a person, I love when the voice actors get it And they just really, you could see in the performances that they really understand their characters. They really get under the skin of these characters. And again, I love it when it's sort of proof in the pudding when you don't have, again, you don't, this isn't Shakespeare. There's nothing crazy going on that you haven't seen before. You have your baddies, you have little would-be love triangles, you have the good guys, you have the heroes, you have the swagger, you have the charisma, all these things. But when you have a simple formula and you're still putting performances that feel this great, I think that even lends a bit more credence to the artfulness. And it's just, I was really taken by it. I was, even before watching the making of stuff and getting to know the actors and the players a little bit better, just knowing inherently in just playing the game that, wow, these characters, these people really understood their characters and made an effort to make these characters feel believable and appealing, very appealing, even the bad guys.
Totally.
So, that's a lot. That takes a lot.
I think a lot of that comes through just in Amy Hennig's insistence on focusing on just a few key players. I think there's nothing diluted. I think everything feels like it belongs there. There's no waste
Great
in
point.
any way. But I wanted to bring in Elena now. We haven't brought her in yet. We're talking about the other love triangle. First of all, I'm curious if you expected to see her in this one, and because they basically don't mention her at all. I mean, she doesn't even come up, and then you kind of find her, and I think they do something very important in this game with Elena, which is, and they did it in the first one too, but there's something special about her character because from the very beginning they reinforced this idea that she is apart from Drake. She is her own thing. She has her own ambitions. She has her own slyness. She has her own brain in her head. She's here for her own reason. And obviously they're in fact, in the first Uncharted, they're much more intertwined naturally than they are in the second one. And I love how they introduce her and she's just going after this madman on her own. Like, it's not like has anything to do with Drake. Now, is it a little small world? Sure. But it's cool that they run into each other and she's with this mysterious cameraman, Jeff, and she's just chasing after Lazarovich for her own reasons. And she knows it's dangerous. And so, and it's funny because Chloe's the only one that doesn't know that, because the audience knows and Elena and Drake know, but she's the only one that doesn't know that, oh, actually this chick can hold her own and is pretty badass. And it's acknowledged later when she takes one of the Lugers off of one of the dead Nazis, one of Schaefer's party, and gives it to her to use. I like that they do that for Elena. So in other words, her existence in the series is not contingent as Nate's love interest only. She exists above and beyond Nate. And I do like at the end when Chloe tells Nate to tell, she's like, tell Elena that you love her, and he presumably does, but you don't see it, which I think is cool. Like it's you're expecting that and it just doesn't happen, which I think is really neat. So talk to me a little bit about Elena and yeah, at the top is, did you expect to see her?
I was thinking about her a lot as I started the game. You got this other gal. There's obviously another romantic interest. Is Elena going to pop up? And I think after a while, I just gave up that notion of, I guess she's not going to be in this one. And then just as you start thinking that, she pops up with her cameraman. It was so cool to see her. And yeah, she's a proper sort of companion, a proper mate for Drake, because she's just about as intelligent as he is. I love the courage. I love the pluckiness. I love the fact that it's a very realistic relationship. And sometimes it seems like she's the voice of reason. And sometimes it seems like Nate's the voice of reason. And it kind of goes back and forth. It's a little bit of a juggling act there. They're proper contemporaries. And I think that's awesome. And you could really see them working with each other. And I love the way that she calls Nate out too on shit. She says when he's being annoying or when he's being stubborn or that kind of thing. It's a lot of fun. And I love the fact that they did develop towards the end of the game. You have that romance being rekindled, obviously. But, it's done with that sort of gentle touch, the playful banter. It's not cheesy. And again, I think that comes down to the voice acting too. It's just a really great relationship. And again, I love the way it seems realistic, and what you said too about her being her own person. She has her own bent. She has her own career. She's certainly not a treasure hunter, but you could see someone with these tools being paired with someone like Nate, who's this notorious treasure hunter. So, it just works. It's just super, again, nothing too crazy or complex. It's not Hemingway, but it's just fun.
No, I totally agree. It works. It was good to see her again. I wish I can go back and remember what it was like to play it for the first time. It's just been so very long, but it almost feels like it couldn't be Uncharted without her. I think this is kind of when it starts, and obviously she's the main player in the other games too. I mean, that's no surprise to anyone there. But it is cool to see her pop back up. Jeff, of course, meets an untimely end. Connor writes in
Poor
and says,
Jeff.
"R.I.P. Jeff the cameraman. We hardly knew ye." I remember when the game came out that was like a joke. Jeff was, and I think Jeff was like a multiplayer skin too, so you can like play as him.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But I do.
Did he have his
What did you think
camera?
about the Jeff scene? Just in the Jeff death, just in that it's pretty brutal. Like because it shows Lazarovich is like, I don't give a fuck, you know. And he does it obviously to his own soldier later on. But
Yeah. I knew
what
that
did
soldier was dead
yeah, it's like
the
what did
moment he
you
walked in.
what did you think about Jeff dying? I mean, did you have any thoughts about that? It is he's like a cult character, so it's funny to talk about.
Well, fans of the franchise love Elena, right? So when you first meet her and she's coupled with a dude, already you're like, sort of like, oh, what? Like she's with this other guy. So you're immediately kind of angry for Nate. But then you realize it's sort of platonic and he's just the cameraman. But I'll tell you what I love about the Jeff character. And, you know, Jeff, we hardly knew thee. But I love that whole sort of amplified escort mission where Nate's sort of dragging him through. You know, he's mortally wounded, and Chloe and Elena are basically doing the combat while Drake just kind of running and gunning while he's dragging this dude along. So fun. Again, like just the ideas, like the concepts for things like that. Just having Jeff in the game for that scene was enough. I love that. You know, just thinking creatively outside the box and what could we do in this scene. And no two chapters are alike. You always have something different going on. They really, I mean, it really got imaginative. It was, you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop from chapter to chapter, and you're never disappointed.
Totally. I totally agree. And you're right. That scene is really special because it's not just another escort scene. It's not like you're just waiting for a waypoint to kind of guide along or anything like that. And there's so many cool parts of the game with the helicopter scenes when it's just destroying everything and you're jumping from roof to roof. There's so many just great action scenes. And yeah, it does end for with an untimely death for him. But I do like, and I am curious that I was going to ask you this at the end, but it kind of makes more sense now, which is Chloe and Elena kind of represent the devil and the angel on Drake's shoulder. And Drake proves himself, I think, over and over again to just be like pure good, like chaotic good kind of
Yes.
character, where he's always making the sacrifice. He's like willing to Chloe kind of shows a dark side. I mean, we forget about it in the later games, but she's like, leave Jeff behind. Like, what is going on? Like, fuck this, and over and over again. And it brings out this again, this chaotic goodness in Nate that seems almost unbelievable. I wonder what you think about that. This idea that Nate just is good. It almost seems unbalanced to, and Lazarovich brings up later, it seems unbalanced to the reality of the way he acts, but he has like this code, this ethic. And that's where the name of the game, I think, kind of comes from, is like Honor Among Thieves. But what did you make of that, or did you make anything of that? Because I think that those two characters really bring that to the fore intentionally.
Definitely. And you know, that's true. That's a really important thing to mention about the Chloe character especially in the exchange with Jeff dying, is that, you know, is this potential at that point in the game? Is she this femme fatale? Is she really cold blooded, or is she just at best pragmatic or a little detached? Is she a survivor? You know, where Nate, much, much more selfless. And that really comes out a lot more in this game, where, you know, you kind of see him as this Indiana Jones, Han Solo scoundrel type, right? Likable, appealing, but, you know, what's his end game? He's a treasure hunter. He's a thief. He's sort of a cut up. He seems very irreverent, right? But in this game, you get a little more of that sort of the Nate that's willing to sacrifice, that's willing to kind of stick his neck out for his friends, that's able to put aside the treasure hunt to go after the baddie. And, you know, maybe even you could argue save the world in this game. So you get a little more of that, of the depth of this character now, where it's a little less surface and a little more substance. And that's a proper way to sort of evolve a hero in a franchise. And you come out of Uncharted 2 liking Nathan Drake even more, which, that's how you want a franchise to progress.
One other thing that I think this game did really interesting decision, which some TV shows and movies do, and I think this is cool. And in fact, it's what I said that would have been interesting to do in Metal Gear Solid 3 when I said that, like, why aren't people speaking in Russian? And it would be kind of like you'd be maybe even ignorant of some of what they're saying, is that
Right.
the Tenzin, so the Sherpa character you meet, who's like Schaefer's companion or whatever in that village, he doesn't speak English at all. And I actually looked up, I don't remember ever looking it up, so I don't think I ever did, but I actually looked up everything he said. Like I looked up
Oh,
the actual
shit.
translations of what he says, and it's interesting. Like when he's giving the tea, he's like, "It's good for you. Like drink it. Okay, I'm gonna go get." It's like he's saying totally normal things, and it's funny that he starts calling him Drake, and you can kind of hear it, and it's in his like it's like in his particular accent. I was
Yeah.
gonna call it weird, but that's not really nice. And then and then and they have this like interaction with each other, and they kind of understand each other. They even had that crazy fight where Tenzin almost dies.
Yeah.
What did you make of that decision to have this character in which you can't really communicate, which is kind of the anti-Drake in that way, because Drake is always, wisecracking. It's funny because he makes jokes about like how he's like being sent on this thing and he can't even speak to this dude at all and has no idea what's going on. Tenzin does this thing where Drake's trying to get information out of like what is he scared of? Why does he have this knife? And he does like the claw thing or whatever. And Drake has like no idea what he's talking about. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I don't think I really took that in as much as I probably should have the first times that I played the game back in the day. That this character Tenzin is, you just can't communicate with him, and yet you understand him. The interactions with him are endearing. You like him. You're hoping that he lives. He does, which is good. And so, what did you make of that character? Anything?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at the character. You already you like him automatically because he nurses Drake back to health, right? And I think also it was really cool and really brave to have all that. You're right, like have all those exchanges in a different language, not have it subtitled. There's some exposition with Nate kind of repeating what Tenzin says, so you get the gist and all that kind of thing. But I love that it sort of ratcheted up and dialed up the danger of them exploring that sort of snowy tundra snowy mountains together, because you have two guys together who can't even understand each other. And then you come across that sort of danger, it gets amplified. You come across the pack of dead wolves. They intimate that snowy ice monster wampa like creature, and you're like, these two guys that can't even communicate are going to have to contend with all these dangers. I like that. I like the way that it made it feel even more, it really ratcheted up the tension and the drama, because these guys have to work together, but yet they can't even understand a word each other is saying. Kind of a neat little formula for drama.
Yeah, I agree. I dug that decision. I don't know why I didn't take that in more when I was younger, but as far as the game is concerned, we've talked about the gunplay, but I was curious how you felt about the beat to beat puzzle solving and the mechanic of the journal and notebook and all of that. Now, this is of course a staple of Uncharted, going back to the first game and still to this day. I don't feel like Uncharted games are that challenging, but I just hate puzzles. I just hate them. I don't know why. I just hate doing them. Because first of all, I know they exist to slow the player down. I mean, just from a design standpoint, that's
Sure.
true. I mean, I just know games too well, I think, at this point and that's totally fine. Sometimes it matters and sometimes it doesn't. But watching it as a passerby instead of playing it, I was like, man, it's so funny because the game is moving so quickly. And then they're like, no, you're going to stay here now. We put all this time and love into this massive monastery, and you're going to see every fucking inch of it probably for way too long. So I remember I had to solve those puzzles and write the guide for it and everything. But I got to be honest with you, when I encounter puzzles, like some of the more complicated puzzles in games like this, I just look up at the solution online. I'm like, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm just not, like the statues that got 7 arms and they have to all point in a different direction, and you got the fucking mirrors.
You won't even do those?
I'm just like, I'll try at the beginning, but I'm just like, at this point, a game, a rival of Uncharted, which is the new Crystal Dynamics Tomb Raider games, had something very cool in the third game. Actually, so it would be Eidos Montreal's Tomb Raider,
Okay.
which is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where they had different difficulty settings for all these different things, and one of them was puzzles, which I thought was super cool, where it's like, you like hard gunplay, cool, like just skip the puzzles, yeah, great, all right, fine, fuck the puzzles. So I'll have the hard gunplay and all of this, or you can do it the opposite way, or you can do story mode, And I dug that. It's not a game problem. It's just a me problem. I don't play. I say this over and over again ad nauseum on Sacred. I do not play games to solve puzzles. Like I don't. I'm not here to fucking solve problems. I find that annoying and daunting.
You could do Wordle.
Right. Exactly. It's like I want to play a fucking adventure, a point and click adventure game where I have to just click on everything and like, does the key go in the door? Does the key go in the treasure chest? Do I put the key in my pocket and leave the room? I don't want to do this. That's life. So, what did you think about the puzzle solving aspects of Uncharted 2?
Well, you got to know what you like. So I appreciate you for that. And I got to say, what you were speaking to about sort of custom tailoring your gameplay experience is a really, that's intriguing. I like that. I like the idea of
because I like hard gunplay. Like I like that a lot, but I don't want the whole game to be that hard.
So you want to dial that up, but you want to dial the puzzles back, and you kind of just want to kind of have it your way, a little Burger King.
Right. Sure. Exactly.
Which I like that. I like that idea too. For me, I like the variety of having the journal mechanic. I like the way it works in tandem with the temples and with the puzzles. I think it's a very logical thing to integrate into a game like this, where you're exploring these ancient temples and you have to solve these puzzles to get relics and gain passage and all that kind of stuff. It just works in this world, in this Indiana Jones-esque world. But I think I would like actually to do the opposite of what you say, Kyle. And now I don't know what happens with Uncharted beyond the first two games, but if you could make these games longer, and that would work. Let's say you make an Uncharted game that's 25 hours long. I wouldn't even mind slowing down longer to sort of try to solve puzzles that were maybe even a little more complex. But the way it is in part one and the way it was in part one and the way it is in part two, I liked that the puzzles were just difficult enough, and I say difficult in air quotes, to slow you down and control the pace just enough. They were pretty easy. It just adds another thing to do besides the platforming, besides the combat, besides the cutscenes and the cinematics. And I like the way it kind of works with the world. I think it's a nice way to add to the experience. But I would love to see them do more with it. I would love to. It almost seems like in this one, it almost seemed like a little bit of an afterthought. There was only maybe 3 sequences where you really had to solve something, and just again consulting the journal and then just figuring out the sequence and all that.
These big set pieces. You can tell that they spent a ton of time on
big set pieces. It's true.
They were huge. I mean, to their credit, they are huge. They're great.
They're huge.
Yeah,
they're huge, and it's trtrue. The visuals that they craft in order to go along with these sequences are, a big component of the animation and the graphics. But yeah, I think for me it worked. I understand what you're saying though. It could get aggravating again if your blood is boiling and you really want you're just amped to keep going forward. Sometimes slowing down isn't what you want especially for players like you and I who enjoy the combat aspects, I think.
Yeah, it's funny, man, because I would have just liked more and more combat. It doesn't make sense though. A guy like Drake needs to solve the puzzle, and you need to do it yourself.
Right.
I'm not saying Uncharted should be something else. It's one of those things. I'm not smart enough for these games. I'm just not a sophisticated gamer in any way. I'm very self-deprecating in that way, but I just want to beat things up and like shoot things and slash at things. That's why I can't. Elden Ring, my 20 hours with Elden Ring, I'm like, I can't do this. It's just I don't want to fucking watch the frame. Watch every frame and roll through the attack, and then it's like I just want to hit the fucking square button, dude.
That's not fun for you.
Yeah, like I don't. Yeah. Which is weird because I like I like my hard games to be 2D, because then I feel like it's a little fair for my simple mind.
There's a difference. I hear you.
All right, Dig, let's talk about that train sequence finally. Joey Gondolager wrote in and said, Brothers Moriarty, how absolutely iconic is that train level? In an era where so many third-person shooters stuck to a simple level path, Uncharted 2 introduced this level about 2/3 of the way through the game, where you climb up, over, around, and through this one piece of architecture as the scenery subtly changes from greenery to snowy. Pair that with an incredible helicopter fight and having the level end where the game began, and you have at an all-time moment in PlayStation history right there. While the graphics in this game are definitely superb and that opening is iconic, when I think of Uncharted 2, this is what I think of the most. All I can say is thank God for tunnels, indeed. That subtle is the right word with the train sequence, which is a famous gameplay sequence, design sequence that I think, I could be wrong, I think Neil Druckmann helped design. And it's an absolutely bonkers idea. when you watch
So
it,
good.
it doesn't look as good as you think it looks. But when you're playing it, because like, especially on the PS3, like there's all these bamboo forests, but they're just pieces of geometry. Like there's nothing really there. And I remember sitting there, like if you just sit there, like it'll just repeat ad nauseum.
I was wondering about
I don't
this.
think it ever like just kills you or something like that.
So at
That's the
Yogi
kind of shit I
Bear's
used to try
after
when
a
I would
while.
like write guides. It's like, what happens if you do this?
Okay.
And so I love how you're like slowly getting through and you're dodging the different signals, and then the enemies are coming up, and then you're going back into the train and you're having fist fights, and then you're finding new weapons, and then you're going through crates, and then you get sucked into this crazy tunnel, and then you come out, and now you're just in the mountains. It's fucking awesome. And the mountain part, the point, it's all leading up to the crash of the train, like we said earlier, and yet you're still totally invested in thinking like, well, we know how it ends, but how do we get there? It's all about the journey. It's what we always say on the show about what makes so much fiction good. It's about that journey, and that sequence is just absolutely stellar. There's something about Naughty Dog that's just way better, and I say this all the time. There's just something about Naughty Dog that's way better than almost every other developer. It's not even close sometimes, and I think that one of those things is just like, yeah, we're gonna do this. This is There's more even than that, and you could tell by the way they repeat things like that. There's a lot of cool driving sequences, so they want to make sure they got that tech in a couple times. You want to utilize everything you're making. You could tell that they made this train stuff and they're like, let's use it. I mean, let's use it. We figured out how to make it work and we're going to use it. And then of course, the other kind of third technical thing that I think they added in Uncharted 2 was the falling floors and like the helicopters destroying things, or like at the end of the game in Shambhala, everything's falling and the earthquakes and you're
God.
jumping around. So there's a lot of like, that's why they're repeating things and using things for long periods of time. I don't want to give them too much credit. They're doing it because they're like, we need to get a 15-hour game out of this. We don't want to use the train sequence we worked on for 6 months for 10 minutes, right? So there's that too. But it is a wonderful sequence. I know you wanted to talk about it, so talk to me about how you felt about it.
I mean, dude, talk about a set piece. So impressive. I mean, an absolute feat of orchestration and gameplay from a game making perspective. I mean, you think that immediately, even somebody that doesn't make video games, you're like, it's like, holy shit, how did they do this? What a pleasure. And it just goes on and on. And there's so much, not so much, but there's a lot to it that makes it enjoyable when you really think about it. You have the combat, which I find generally very enjoyable in this game. The fact that you could platform, you could go on top of the trains, you could stay inside the trains, you could kind of go in and out. So you have some options. There's a little bit of a choose your own adventure element, even though it's also linear, which is very clever. And then you have the other elements of dealing with the helicopter gunships, dealing with the gun turrets, dealing with the various soldiers, dealing with the armored soldiers, all of that. And then also it forces you to reckon with the signals, dodging the train signals, dodging the tunnels. There's just so much clever stuff that's just makes sense, but you're like, wow, how did they make this all work? How did they make it so fluid and enjoyable? And you don't want it to end. And I think the most important thing, which you said, which I'm not even sure, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but I'm not even sure I even realized at the time because I was enjoying the experience so much, is that if you think back to the opening of the game, this doesn't end well unless there's a second train ride. And why would there be a second train ride? So how this is going to end, and it's still super compelling. I can't wait. This is maybe the top game I've played in the last 3 or 4 years where I can't wait to go back and play it again because I could just see the replay value being so satisfying. I can't see this game getting old. And, this train sequence, I'll always remember. I mean, I talk about smiling from ear to ear, right? I think I was talking out loud, as I was like, holy shit, are you kidding me? Like, just, you would think there was 3 other people in the room playing with me. Everybody was asleep. It was 11 o'clock at night. And that joyfulness, and that's what gaming is for me. That is at the very heart of an experience like this. This is why we play games, to have an experience like this.
Certainly.
And I'll never forget it because it was just like, wow. And also, just to know everybody talking about Uncharted for the last 15 years, it's like, wow, now I'm finally able to understand what all the fuss is about. I say that a lot when we do these shows, but that's a very satisfying element of doing these for me. It's like, wow, I could see what all the hullabaloo is about.
Totally.
And it makes sense.
Totally. And that's why I think this game is so special and so historical, is because it did meet the hype. It was a very hyped game. Everyone loved it. It won all the game of the years and awards and all the
I
rest.
could
And
see it.
and they did it. They really did it. This game is vital to PlayStation's, and it's vital to its entire personality as a platform. Is Nathan Drake and Uncharted. Like that's why when they kind of put Uncharted away after Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy, so that was 2016 2017, and there are rumors that they're making another game. Not Naughty Dog, but some other studio is making a game, like another Uncharted game. And you'll understand if you've played Uncharted 4, you'll understand probably what it is. So you'll understand at some point. But it was sad when they're like, yeah, we want to move on. And it's like, but this feels like the one thing that you probably shouldn't walk away from. Like if there's anything you shouldn't walk away from, it's this almost James Bond like, and I don't mean Bond in terms of the character. I just mean this replicable, repeatable formula that no one's going to get tired of. Like you can just make this game every 3 or 5 years, and make another one. Like I don't think there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, but there's also such a thing as like walking away from something before it's time.
Mm.
We talk about that with Shovel Knight and Yacht Club. Like I think they made a huge mistake with that, and I think they kind of paid the price by not releasing more Shovel Knight. This is a bigger example of that. So, but I want to ask you a couple more questions before we wrap up. One of the things, very indie-like is the supernaturalism in the game. And fine distinguished gentleman wrote in and said, hey, fellas, I know Nate barely avoiding death is a little out there and unrealistic, but the supernatural elements with Yetis and the blue bullet sponges pull you out of the game. So I actually dug this. The idea that Marco Polo was totally wrong, like everything that they were chasing after was totally wrong. They figured this out. There's a little bit of a hint where they talk about how the natives have these like black teeth that are ultimately caused by them eating this resin. But when they discover the tree in Shambhala and all of this, that it's actually not a jewel at all, but rather this resin. And we know that there's a supernaturalism to it, but I like how they fake the supernaturalism, which again reminds me a little bit of The Village, which is a movie you and I really like.
Right.
Where I feel like they get ahead of themselves and they say, well, there is a supernatural element, but we're not going to it's not what you think it is, right? And so you see the monsters and the creatures, and then the mask comes off, but you can tell that the people underneath are blue and all fucked up. They're not like normal human.
Right.
So I didn't really mind it. Like I felt like it was kind of, I don't mind supernaturalism. I don't really know how this works without an element of that, unless it's just straight up treasure hunting, which is cool. And I don't think Drake ever gets involved in any of this stuff for any reason other than treasure. He wants to get rich. In fact, there's like, well, that's kind of a throwaway line, but when Sully breaks him out of the Turkish prison, he says, I spent all your money and most of mine. So they're talking about how they're broke too. Like they're kind of compelled. It's not like just an adventure. Like they're having fun. Like this is what he does. But I don't mind the supernatural stuff as a component of that. I don't think it ever really gets out of control. And I think it's the last boss fight, which we'll talk about, that kind of ruins it, gets a little too far. But like the idea of the Shambhala, this like hidden valley village, and all these interesting natives that are kind of protecting it in order to stop people from abusing the power, which is interesting. I don't mind that at all. What did you think of it?
Give me the supernatural stuff. I love that. In the first one, we had those sort of zombie-like cave dwelling monsters, and they explained it by, these are the genetically mutated people that the Nazis were creating underground in these labs, right? So when you come across this Wampa, this Empire Strikes Back Wampa snow monster thing, you're like, how are they going to explain this thing? Is this an actual monster? Is the game going there? And, don't forget, you have something like, we talk about Indiana Jones a lot in these Uncharted conversations, but we have things like Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? Another supernatural tie-in could be, if you're going to go the religious route, right? You have the Ark of the Covenant. You have the wrath of God coming out and melting the bad guys' faces off at the end. You know what I mean? So that's another way to involve if you want to do the supernatural thing.
Right.
In this one, they kind of dispelled it. Well, these things were guardians. These people were guardians of this area, sort of devised to drive off the curiosity, onlookers, treasure hunters, trespassers, whatever. And they wore these, I don't know what it looks like, a cross between Ridley Scott's Satan from what's that movie that Helene loves, the one with Tom Cruise, Legend.
Legend.
And a Wampa. That's what that thing looked like to me. And it turns out there's actually monsters underneath. So it was a monster wearing a monster suit. I don't know. But it was just fun. Like, give me the cartoony stuff. It's fine. I don't mind that there's a blue monster underneath the ice monster, the Wampa costume. It's kind of fun. And that's enough explanation for me. That's enough exposition. These things were sort of defending this place from people that would come and run afoul of it, right? That would come and loot and plunder.
It's neat. Yeah, the guardians of this hidden power. I'd like to know more about the taste. First of all, I mean, they could have gotten a taste of the power, I think, because the resin that they burn in the museum was some of that stuff. So it's assumed that, again, with the cons and everything, that they got some of it. It would have been cool to know how that all worked. Some backstory of that. Maybe not. I mean, it's not really that important.
They didn't really go into that, did they?
No, like what? How much of a taste did they get? How much power did they get from it? It's cool to insinuate like these great warlords. Actually, there was more to it than that. Like Genghis Khan didn't just conquer Asia; he did it with a little bit of help. I like that. Right? It's kind of lame because it removes the extraordinary nature of the man, but it's also okay. Well, it's like a little supernatural piece. It's like ancient aliens
that's
type
true.
shit,
And it's not this 5,000-pound sapphire, as it turns out. It's a little disappointing that it's not the 5,000-pound.
Yeah, that would be cool as hell. Yeah,
it's just a giant thing of amber that there, basically makes this primordial ooze of, I don't know, superpower, invincibility, whatever.
Let's talk about that. Anthony C. wrote in, said, "Hey guys, it's been a while since I played Uncharted 2, but I remember that the final boss fight is stupid as hell. Why did they have us fight a giant Serbian warlord in a 3-phase boss fight like we were fighting Bowser in a Super Mario game? Thanks for the hours and hours of great content, and remember that Chloe Frazer is the best girl." Very contentious. I don't agree, actually.
Oh,
I think Elena's the best.
Wow, that is contentious.
But that is, I mean, that's not an uncommon thought. In fact, I mean, it's not a spoiler. Chloe is in the Uncharted movie, like, because that movie's all mixed up, like with just grabbing different elements of the games, and she's in it.
Okay,
which is kind of cool.
Oh, it's not based on one specific.
No, it's like
game.
a piece of 4 and a piece of 2 and a piece of 3, and it's.
I don't know if I love that.
It was better than I thought it was going to be, but I had low expectations, but it did pretty well too. So
I got to see that.
I think we'll see more. But what did you think of this final boss fight? Now it's hard to know going back. Was this a point of contention because people were looking for something to complain about, or was it a real point of contention? People really didn't. I don't want to say people. A lot of people didn't like the end boss, and I have to agree. And watching it again, I was like, it reminded me again of the Navarro fight, where I was like, it doesn't need to end like this. I don't know why you feel like the game needs to end like this. And Uncharted 1 ending in that dock fight made a little bit even more sense. Felt full circle with the boat fight in the beginning and all that. This one, it's weird because they almost like took, what is it? They took victory or they took defeat from the jaws of victory or whatever. I don't know, whatever it is. Where they, what I'm talking about?
You mean.
Where
I know what you mean.
They have this beautiful environment in Shambhala. It's just falling apart. It's hectic. What would have been cool is if they were just like, fuck it. Lazarovich dies or whatever, gets caught in chaos. His men and the Guardians are all fighting each other. They're also going to fight you, and you just have to get out of here. Like, that would have been totally sufficient. And you get a piece of that after the boss fight. So I'm confused why they felt they needed it. It's very video gamey in a bad way. And I don't think that they would have made that decision again if they could do it again. It seems out of place. It reminds you it's a video game, and it's the only time it really does. And I like when games, and they're bolder now, but I like when games are bold enough to say, like, we don't need a boss fight. We don't need a last boss. We don't need anything like that. We don't need a boss meter and health and all that. It's not necessary. And I feel like this is one of those games where it wasn't really necessary, especially because Shambhala itself would have been an interesting last boss fight, as you just need to get out of there. That's it.
Escape.
So. And it would have been cool to say, like, this is so powerful that Lazarovich is just irrelevant. He just gets fucking killed, trying to go after it. Like so many before him, he's just another failed warlord trying to get access to this. And you don't need to have, it doesn't need to be any crazier than that. Right. And then it's just like getting out of there with your hide. So I don't want to rewrite Amy Hennig of all people, but that's the way I would have done it. How did you feel about that last boss fight?
I mean, you know me. Give me a good boss fight. I'm down. I'm not really sure, though, it fits into the template, quote unquote, of Uncharted. I have to agree with you on that. Now, there is a lot of ways you could have done this, right? First of all, from a visual standpoint, it would have been cool. I mean, if you're going to make Lazarovich a proper baddie and you're going to do the visual and you're going to tag on that visual component, make him really huge, like Cable in the comic books or something.
Right.
I'm not talking about Josh Brolin Cable. I'm talking about Rob Liefeld Cable, right? Make him a proper, make him a proper villain, make him a proper cartoon baddie, do something fun. But, the boss fight thing kind of dawned on me earlier in the game, Kyle, because the first time you fight the Wampa snow monster, and then it seemed like it was mostly Wampa snow monsters, right? There was a couple where you had to fight. There was a couple of sequences where we had to fight both at once in the temple and once again. So they did sort of try to tie in, sort of coax that boss model in a little bit. And I wouldn't have minded it if it was done a little better. The ending of Uncharted 1 of Drake's Fortune was probably the worst part, right? It was very anticlimactic. The baddie changed at the last moment. That's not always a bad thing.
Right.
But it felt a little bit tagged on. It felt a little bit like an afterthought. In this one, it felt like it could have been fun. It also wasn't that difficult. I think that does speak to basically the rhythms of the game, though. That's consistent. I don't know. I would like to see, if you're going to do, here's my thing with Uncharted, and who knows, maybe this happens. Don't ruin it for me, but if you're going to do an Uncharted with boss fights, incorporate that in so it feels consistent and woven throughout the game, because I think I could get down for that. I'm an 8-bit guy. That's how I grew up with NES. I'm definitely conditioned by the boss thing. I love the formula. I can't see it ever getting old. I think Kojima does a great job with that, right? Especially in thinking of the Metal Gear games. He's the master. So I don't mind, I don't mind. It doesn't have to be Shadow of the Colossus, but like have the boss fights. But yeah, this felt like they could have done something better. And I love your thought about maybe, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, maybe that sought after power is just too much for a man and it destroys him. And that's the ending. That seems like a proper nod to everything that this game is inspired by. So why not go that route?
Yeah. I would have loved the idea of just throwing Lazarovich away as being like,
yeah,
whatever.
That's great.
I mean,
That's great. That's great, dude. And ending, when you have an experience like this, you don't want to end on a low note, even though it's not a deal breaker. Obviously, it's not the most egregious thing in the world. You want to end on an up note because the experience was so wonderful throughout.
Sure. Agreed. Ding, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you wanted to talk about?
I was thinking about this, Kyle. When you have something that's this amazing and holds up this well, I was thinking about how could they generally improve it. And I don't know. I thought of a couple of things, but I don't know that I would think of anything that was profoundly different. Here's the thing that I'm finding that I really love about this game, and I'm loving about Nathan Drake and this protagonist specifically, is that this game and this character, there's this really joyful tone and spirit to this game. Very giddy, upbeat, sort of that thrill seeking, again, very much like Indiana Jones, maybe even more so. And I think Nathan Drake is a less dour protagonist than even Indy, as fun as Indy is. And I love it. It occurred to me that the fun at the center of this experience is that there's nothing more fun than a character in the most profound danger that refuses to admit that they're in danger. It doesn't matter what's happening to Nathan Drake throughout this game. He's making jokes and wisecracking and acting like it's no big deal and no skin off his back the entire time. And you realize that you're kind of admiring this guy. It's like, wow, I love this guy's outlook. I mean, what a wonderful, he has his luck. He has his good fortune, right? He has that whole exchange with Victor, and he's like, Sully's like, I'm out, dude. I don't have your luck type of thing. But it's more than that. It's just his spirit of adventure. It's like, wow, I want to kind of I realize at the end of this game that I want to be like Nathan Drake. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, he's
awesome.
Yeah, Drake's awesome. I mean, he's an awesome character, and we've not seen nearly the end of him. Well, obviously, maybe you guys will vote for it, but I'm certainly get to the third game, and the fourth game's a little closer to us time-wise, but we can probably do that at some point in the future too. But
yeah,
is there anything
else? I
have
that PlayStation 4 actually with the pack-in.
Right. Yeah,
Uncharted
that was 2016
4.
when they were 2015-2016 when they were gearing up for Uncharted 4, and Blue Point did those really awesome PS4 ports. And so is there anything else, Nick?
No, I mean, that's it. The only thing is, again, with the grenades, guys, I like the fact that they took it out and sort of gave it its own mechanic, gave it its own button so you don't have to toggle to it.
Right.
But really, the blast radius of the grenades, we can't do something about this. They're almost useless.
Yeah,
You kind of just run in and throw a grenade before you start firing because you know that's the thing to do.
Yeah, and maybe you'll get
I don't think I hit one person with a grenade.
Yeah,
in 15 hours.
The game does count. By the way, that's one thing I want to say is this game, I mean, it's not crazy for the time, but I am in looking back, it's so nice that it's like there are no weapon upgrades, there are no leveling, there's no experience, there's nothing like that. And everyone expected with Uncharted 4, they're like, you're gonna finally be annoying, right? Because The Last of Us kind of does all the shit, and they're like, no, we're not doing that. And
so good.
It's kind of fresh, and that is one of the things about maybe the stage sequence of and then boss fight is that is very old school, and you can kind of see that they do embrace like the staginess of it.
Yes,
which is nice. I like that too. I mean, we Lily Mo's newest game is stage based, and I like that. I'm old school too, but it just doesn't work very well in this the expectations of modern world. Like, I wonder with Uncharted 5 if it comes out and it's linear, if it's going to bother people. And my hope is that it's can't be anything else but linear. Like it's not Uncharted anymore. Then it's then it's one of these many open world games we already have. So I think Uncharted 2 is a very
huge risk.
Uncharted 2
by changing that.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think
right by changing that model.
No, I don't think they would do that.
And you know, also a nod to that whole thing we talked about in the first one too, the fact that it is linear, but they roll chapter to chapter just with the text real quick. It's not interrupted. You're just flowing from one chapter to the next. It has those sort of those headings, those titles that feel, again, that feels like a movie somehow. But I guess because it's not being interrupted, you're flowing from one to the next, but it is still linear. And yeah, there's this a really magical formula to the Uncharted games that I'm getting so far, at least through the first 2 iterations, that is very special. And dude, I've had an amazing time with this game. It's just, I mean, just for out and out fun. And that's the other thing. I think it's accessible. I really think I could give this game to like Helene, and she would be a little bit slower on the uptake. But I think give her a couple of days and she could probably do this game. And I think that's kind of cool to have that sort of, to have something that inviting and something that's that inclusive, but still feels so much like a gamer's game, if that makes sense. Definitely. It's really kind of a tough balancing act, and they pull it off.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, it's got the bona fides of the hardcore, and it enchants regular audiences. These games sell millions and millions of copies for a reason. So well, that's Uncharted 2, Among Thieves. It's available on PS3 and on PS4. I don't know if it's available a la carte, but you can get it in the Blue Point collection, which is really good on PS4. Now, when we finally get to Uncharted 3, I think I will play that alongside you, because I don't think I ever platinumed it on PS4. So there's a compelling reason for me to. I did on PS3 back in the day, but a compelling reason for me to satiate my ridiculous obsessive compulsive disorder with my trophy hunting. So
is it about, one spoiler, is it about the same length as the first 2?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, 4 is the one that gets much longer, as I recall. Okay. But yeah, 3 is about the same length. Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. It's good to know.
Yeah. So Dig, let's end every episode like we do. Every episode of KnockBack, we end with a dad joke. Let's do that.
All right. Here, I got one for you, my friend. Kyle, how was Rome split in 2?
I don't know.
With a pair of Caesars. That's like, true enough. That's like Stimpy saying scissors, right?
Yeah, it is. Caesars.
Idiot.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one. Very nice. Historical.
Not bad.
Accurate. Yeah, not bad at all. Well, Dave, thanks for your time today. Very good. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things KnockBack. Remember, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access, the ability to submit your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas to our show, and submit your topic ideas. We actually, as of the time of recording this, the primary for the new vote is out. We'll see what people come up with. The games the products we owe as of the time we're doing this, I think we owe Metal Gear Solid 4.
Oh, that's going to be fun.
Which I've never played more than like 10 hours of, so I'm going to be totally new to that.
Okay. That'll be cool.
Yeah, that was during like that was actually before Uncharted 2, so that was 2008. That was another one of those PS3 exclusives that was pretty important. And that game is sealed away on PS3. You have to play it there. I mean, there's no way to play it otherwise.
Oh, wow.
Which is fucking stupid and annoying.
Have it right over there.
But we owe that. Ocarina of Time just won, which I haven't played in 20 years,
I never
probably.
played it.
Oh, I
never played that game.
Really wonderful game. I have to figure out where I'm going to play it.
Yeah.
Probably on Switch. I don't know if it's even
Yeah, I
available
guess
there.
on
You have
Switch.
my N64, so you can play it there. I have that game.
The
And then
old-fashioned way.
we owe Star Wars Episode 3, which we'll get to shortly.
That's coming.
So yeah, we have a few things to get through, but we appreciate your support over there on Patreon. So thank you. And leave us nice reviews on podcast services if you choose as well. And that's it. We'll see you next time for more KnockBack. Until then, goodbye. KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.